Okay, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, August 11th at 6:32. This is a regularly scheduled select board meeting. I am here in Tracy Hall with Mary Layton, and I am joined remotely with Marcia Calloway, Rob Gear, Claudette Brochu. Also, I should mention Herb Derby, Brenda Bergmeyer are here with us as well. Yes, so with that said, the first item on the agenda is the approval on the agenda. You may have noticed from your motion sheet that we are accommodating first learned about, I'll say. So we're going to try to make that accommodation. And so I believe the motion sheet includes that. Go ahead, Marcia.
A bit garbled, Roger. Sometimes you're in and out.
It'd either be my tendency for eating my own words or the microphone. So I will try on my end to speak more clearly. So did you catch that we have a liquor license to add to the agenda?
I didn't, but thank you.
Okay. And so that is, I'm going to request that it's the motion is on our motion sheet. So if someone would make that move.
I move to approve the agenda with catering license for American Crafted Spirits.
Are you seconding?
I just want to point out the CATV audio is really garbled.
Okay.
Should
So
we say it again?
So I'm gonna. So were you able to catch Mary making the motion to amend the agenda? No.
No.
Okay.
All
So
right,
we are
try it
going
again.
to. They're going to work on it while I
If she
chat
could just
about the
repeat it.
weather. I'm sorry.
Well,
If she
are
could
you
probably
ready?
just pull the mic closer to her and repeat it, maybe?
Mary, can you make the motion again?
I move to approve the agenda with the addition of approval of catering license for American Crafted Spirits.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor, please raise your. Oh, well, we didn't decide where we wanted to slide it in. How about? I'll just say that we'll do it right after the consent agenda. How's that sound? Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, great. So now I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. We have to make sure that we get Mary's hand. Otherwise, we're gonna have to roll call all the time. But I'm seeing that Mary has raised her hand. Okay, it's unanimous. Go ahead, Claudette. Oh, were you gonna say something? No, you're just raising your hand. Okay. Great.
So is our town manager not present? Is that?
He is present.
Okay.
Do you
Okay,
want to slide to show us Herb CATV?
No, that's okay.
Okay. There he is. Thank you. Okay, excellent. Let's move on to public and select board comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda? Andy Shear, go ahead, just name and locatable address for me.
Hey there, Andy Shear, 23 Hazen Street. Okay, this is actually in regards to the road striping. And first of all, I want to thank Herb for sending the notification out that it was happening. So thank you, I appreciate that. I also realized that this was on the agenda and it was decided 2 weeks ago at the select board meeting at that time, but I had a family emergency, so I was out of town. So unfortunately, I was not able to address it. I guess I just didn't realize that the actual striping would be happening so quickly that it got scheduled by L&M so fast. But as Herb pointed out, it's on their to-do list, so to speak, for this Friday. So I just wanted to make a couple comments about this. This is actually incredibly frustrating that the striping is going ahead, business as usual. The group and the citizens of that neighborhood have really been pushing for some traffic calming. And the cheapest way to do it is actually with paint. We're not talking about building any speed tables or anything like that. So this is the opportunity that the town has to make a positive change for very little money. So by creatively striping the roads and not the traditional line straight down the middle and, you know, whatever, there are other ways to do this. And so no offense to Herb and Chief Keeling and the planning department and DPW, but like, they're not transportation planners. And so the decisions that were made to just kind of go ahead with this regular, you know, thing that Larry said to go ahead and do is not the best way to achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is traffic calming, which many, many people, hundreds of residents have said. So I guess I'm just pretty frustrated that we're just going ahead with this. And I would actually like the town manager or select board or whoever can do it to ask them to stop the section in the village on Beaver Meadow Road until we can have the meeting that this group was promised we would have with, again, planning, town manager, chief of police, whomever. Because I feel like it's sort of just not even regarding any of the work we've been trying to do for 3 years to slow traffic down. So it's really a good opportunity for us just to like pause, let's talk, let's have this group meeting that we've been talking about having, and so we can actually implement some creative solutions that are very, very cost effective. And it's just basically the cost of paint. And furthermore, I realize that the budgeting has gone out of whack with this, so we're only doing a certain part of it. Let's stop it altogether and not have any additional expenses paid when we have other creative solutions that we could do. So I think it's the road unstriped is fine in the meantime. Everyone who lives on there has said it's safer as it is. So why can't we just make a bold decision here and just say, let's not do it? It's very unusual to stop what we're doing, but you know, because the momentum is there, we have the contract. But and if it is, then maybe we can just say, hey, let's just reschedule it until we can have this meeting and figure out. They can do the striping, but why don't we just wait till we can get a plan that is really addressing the safety of people instead of just addressing the best thing for cars? Because in all reality, we're just going ahead with business as usual for the cars, and it's not making any roads any safer for pedestrians. All right, I'm getting the sign from Roger, so I'll stop there. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for your public comment, Andy. Thank you. Any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Okay. Are there any select board comments? Go ahead, Marcia.
So I'd just like to follow up on Andy's question and see, you know, I know that there was a gentleman on the listserv who was saying that he was disappointed that his road wasn't going to get painted. I know that one of the reasons for having not everything painted and not the, I don't know, the edging painted, etc. for all roads was lack of paint and lack of funds. So is it possible to do some adjustments, and can the town manager address that?
Thank you, Marcia. So I believe that we heard very thoroughly actually addressed this matter with us when it was an agenda item. And one of the open questions is there are some funds that remain for consideration of the local contractor for consideration of the village area, but and then should we have more information, it may come before the board. So that was, so I would say that I believe that that has been addressed thoroughly on our last meeting, and I think any further discussion would have to be a future agenda item.
Can't hear you.
Any other board members have select board comments or disagree that it wasn't thoroughly addressed in our July 28th meeting?
Well, excuse me.
Can you hear me? I
Yes.
don't know how to help. Okay.
I'm just not, I think this is a different question. And so I'm just wondering, is it possible to just, yes, he addressed it, but is it possible to switch the painting on road A for road B?
Herb can turn his mic and answer this question. We'll answer the question, but again, this is an agenda item, so I do want to thank for the public comment. And then, go ahead, Herb. Can you
Can you
answer
guys
that
hear me
question?
okay? So I am not going to change my mind on this. We've gone out to bid for this. This town is historically striped our roads, both with the center line, fog lines, and in the village area with regard to stop bars, crosswalks, parking spaces, handicap spots. I'm drawing a blank on another one, but that we typically have out there. For the last 3 or 4 years, since at least Andy left, we've not had enough budget to do the whole town at a given point in time. We tried to fix that last year during the budget process. The board graciously upped the budget by 45% for this year with the idea of trying to get the entire town striped the way that it's supposed to be in its entirety. Due to the pandemic, there was some paint shortage. There were a number of communities that didn't do striping last year due to budget and COVID-related concerns. So this year, the contractor that typically does this is way overtaxed. So the bid that they put in is for center lines and fog lines, refused to put in a bid for the village stuff. So what I'm trying to do with available funds that I have is to try to do as much that I can, which is the center lines. The fog lines will not be done this year. And then I'm trying to work with a past contractor to do the village area with the remaining budget that I have left over for not doing the fog lines. But I may still have to come back to the board to find some additional funds to finish up the village funds. There is definitely a severe depletion of the existing markings that are out there that are making the village and other areas of town not only for pedestrians, but also for vehicular traffic. This town needs to do the markings that it agrees to do and wants to have done. I'm not changing my mind.
Okay. Thank you, Herb. Marcia, was your question answered?
Apparently, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other select board comments? I see some hands. I'll take a little more public comments. But we do have a packed agenda. Go ahead, Peter, and then I'll come back to you, Andy, okay?
That's okay, Andy can go ahead. I can wait for Andy.
Thank you, Peter, but I recognized you. Can you, would you like to go?
Okay, I was logging in late because I had some problems, so I missed the discussion. So I only heard what Herb had to say. And, you know, frankly, I don't see how that's taking public input from 3 years of discussion about particularly pedestrian safety on Beaver Meadow. And because of tradition and the fact that the center line has always been this way, is not at all taking into account what we have been saying. 3 years we've been through this. You all denied, you voted against after voting for moving ahead with a sidewalk grant. You have said you've been absolutely no action on a speed cart. Absolutely no action on even the signs that Herb mentioned. So now we are saying that available data demonstrates that having a center line increases speed if we don't have a fog line. We know this from a number of studies, one of which I shared with you, that where we know that the speed increases by 7 miles an hour. So basically what we're thinking is after 3 years of advocacy, the last movement of the town manager is to make our road less safe. That seems unacceptable, and I request taking a look at this and making it a priority and having action as opposed to inaction, which is what we've become accustomed to. And I always appreciate the fact that you guys listen, but here we're asking for a particular action, and that is pausing the painting of the center lines because of the evidence that we can bring forward that it increases speed, especially in the absence of fog lines. We are not getting any traction on this. And the reason we're not getting any traction is because of the way it's always been done. Tell that to the mother with the 13-year-old kid that was almost hit on Beaver Meadow. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I'm not opposed to striping the rest of Beaver Meadow. I'm talking about the like 2-mile section from, was it Brigham Hill that comes in right by the Ballard Trail start into town. That's it. That's all I'm asking. That's the walkable loop in the village. I don't care if you want to strike the whole thing out to the dirt roads on all of them. That's fine. I'm not saying that that's not an issue. That's an issue and that needs to be done. I'm just asking for the walkable loop in town. Please pause the striping for this little section. I'm not talking about the whole thing, Herb, just that little bit. Thank you.
I just want to be clear that what we authorized was for center line painting.
No,
Can you hear me?
yes.
So I just want to be clear, what the board had authorized was center line painting. So that is what is moving forward. Okay. I'm going to move on, but I just want to say, I believe all board members would agree with me that we value you. Several of you have alluded several times to material that you would like to bring forward for the town to consider. I think that is really valued and appreciated, and I think you should do that. I think you should do that independent of the decision to approve a contract for center line painting. Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but part of the plan is to not stripe the center line as has been done every time. That is the way that things are done now. It's transportation planning has moved. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the actual way to improve things is not to do it the way it's always been done, which is striping the line right down the middle of the road. That is the problem. That is what we're asking to pause. This little section of the roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Claudette, go ahead, and then I'm going to move on if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, as a completely different, or as a different way of thinking, can we, when Herb is looking at the other vendor for the in-town, can we ask that vendor to put the fog line in on Beaver Meadow from Main Street to Ballard Trail?
Thank you, Claudette. Herb is indicating not necessarily, but I do think I appreciate your thinking to sort of separate a possible future project out of what we have authorized that should be accomplished. So I think that thinking is okay. Any further discussion? Okay, so I'm going to move on from select board and public and select board comment to the consent agenda. Okay. So let's do that. Is there what we do when we do the consent agenda is we receive correspondence, we authorize the warrant, and we pass meeting minutes unless we you hear me? Okay, this
No,
is
Roger.
serious and polemical issues that we need to discuss at this meeting. So how can we fix this? Is it just a matter of me talking into the mic like I'm eating it? Is
I
that it?
wonder if it's the mic.
No, I think it's directional.
I think we're going to, as I said, we have a very serious agenda. I'm not willing to take these interruptions.
So speaking
with
to,
apologies.
use the microphone. please.
Is this better now?
Not really.
Try it again, Roger.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to switch everything rest. I'm so sorry.
No.
I laid a smack down, but I whatever, or whatever that's worth. All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Better,
that's
yeah.
much better.
Okay, great. So I was just reiterating our process. So we can, if we have anything that we would like to pull to discuss separately, I will take that as part of the motion. How does that? So go ahead. Is there some, Marcia, would you like to pull something?
Yeah, the three pieces of correspondence from Stephanie Wolf, Harry Roberts, and Susan Lupian.
Okay,
I'd like to pull the minutes for a small edit.
okay. So why don't we take a motion to pull the correspondence, and we'll discuss Mary's meeting minutes when we take the motion for the rest of the consent agenda. How's that sound? So is that okay? Can you hear me? Yes, that's okay. Okay.
Oh. Are we going to be addressing the Reed case or not? Or is that part of the?
At this time, to discuss it, we would have to discuss it as correspondence.
Okay.
for the
All
moment.
right. So just let's pull that one for correspondence.
Okay, so let's effectively pull the correspondence, and then can I get a motion for that? Go ahead, please. Point of order. Appreciate it. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Herb. So Herb is suggesting that we make a motion to approve the consent agenda. And so the first, and then we'll minus the correspondence. So can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda minus the correspondence?
I'll try to do that.
Mary's gonna do it.
I move to approve the consent agenda minus the correspondence and the meeting minutes.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine.
that's fine. Okay, is there a second? Okay, second.
Who was the second?
Marcia seconded it. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, now we're essentially discussing the warrant, the
So you
warrants.
approve, you need to act
Okay.
on the consent agenda item that
Okay.
you're okay with.
So yes, so
We
we
said it,
seconded it, right?
Yep.
Okay, so now we need to take,
To
so
vote
now
on
we'll
that.
take the, all in favor of that motion to approve the consent agenda minus correspondence in the meeting minutes. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing that. Now we're in discussion.
There you go.
Now we'll take up the,
Lost you again, Roger. It's that mic or your connection. Everything's melting from the heat.
Roger, we can't hear a thing you're saying. Oy. Nothing.
I need a mic. I unfortunately talk the most, so I need the best one.
Switch.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
You can hear me now.
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so now we're in the discussion of essentially the AP warrants. Does anyone have any discussion of the AP warrants?
We
I
just,
do. Go ahead, Claudette.
I thought what did we just vote on? I thought we just voted on the,
We voted on approving the consent. I got a second
And we voted.
and we voted.
We
So we,
On to the correspondence.
Okay.
Right.
okay. Great. So now let's move on to the correspondence then. So let's begin. Should we begin with the discussion of the correspondence? Yes. Great. Marcia, what would you like to discuss of the correspondence? I think you wanted to pull this.
Yeah. Okay. So for the Stephanie Wolf and Stephen Mann, I think that their request is reasonable and we should consider scheduling this for an agenda item to investigate opportunities for a dog park and an implementation of a leash law.
I don't disagree. In one of the other letters, there was her reference that we've been trying to talk about that for a year. I think Burlington, I think I saw in Burlington put out a resolution that indicated, that outlined the problems and then indicated what some preliminary steps to take on the question. I guess dogs have gone up like 700% or something like that. So, so it's certainly a unique moment. So do other board members agree that we should schedule this as a future agenda item?
Yes, I think it's reasonable. We
Yes.
shouldn't drag on for another year either.
Okay. Marcia, do you have, does that sort of meet the end of that correspondence?
It does.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Next.
The second one, Harry Roberts made some suggestions that I thought were valid that should be considered and might be something that the town manager could consider for implementation. So just throwing that out for him to consider.
Okay. Thanks. And
Next
then-
one,
Yeah, please.
Suzanne Lupian, she writes about trails versus wildlife, and I'm just wondering if this has been brought to the Trails Committee. Is there a plan for discussion and remediation? And basically, how can the select board help? Because I think disruption of wildlife and habitat is significant and should be considered.
My understanding is that the trails that Suzanne has talked to Bree, who attends those meetings. So that is what I know.
Okay. And then finally, we don't need to get into this other than the fact that I want to make it clear that I believe our job is to point out issues that we think are going to potentially affect the town. So with regard to the Reed case, I think that basically the Central Hudson case that Rod was discussing is about whether promotional advertising by a Public Utilities Commission is consistent with the First and 14th Amendments, and about the appropriates of using intermediate level scrutiny versus not strict scrutiny. And basically, I think the problem here is that we need to send this to our town attorney, who would have to defend a case, because what we're actually going to have to be defending is whether or not being too busy with things like sewerage and density-based zoning is going to outweigh the need to follow the current law, which is Reed. And when the court has a case that's going to address facts that will get beyond Reed, we'll know more. But for now, that's the law. And I would like the town attorney to weigh in about what we should do, because he'll be the one that has to defend any case that's brought. And I think that trying to argue that we're too busy because of density studies and sewerage studies is not going to bode well. So that's the end of my concern for that. And I would ask the board to just throw it to the town attorney for his input.
Okay. I think that question maybe should, okay. Do board members have any, do board members want to follow through with Marcia's recommendation to send her memo and the memo of Rod Francis to the town attorney? And what would we be asking them, Marcia?
Basically, if he thinks that this merits bumping up in terms of amending our zoning bylaws so that we avoid any cases being brought, which, you know, claim that we're in violation because of the way we are doing something. And let me be clear, bylaws are put together by a planning commission and approved in due course, and they are basically implemented by an administrator. Rod Francis in this case. And then if there's a problem, it goes to a town attorney. It's not this board's decision to say what is possible or not possible, or what's law or what isn't law. What we should do is try and maintain our role, which is to say, we can see something might be a problem and we want to avoid it. And the way we do that is to get a legal opinion from the person who's responsible for it.
Okay. Rod Francis has his hand up with a little bit of a comment. Written a memo as a follow-up to what Marcia brought forth, and then I think we should perhaps consider Marcia's recommendation and then move on. Go ahead, Rod Francis.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to make a couple of quick points. So the characterization that the memo that I provided suggests that we are too busy doing other more important things is not fair. The point that I was making in the memo, to be clear, to state it more bluntly, is that as a zoning administrator, I'm aware of the deficiencies in several sections of the zoning regulations where they don't comply with either statute or case law, or in this case, a Supreme Court decision. So is the town attorney, and the town attorney was consulted extensively when I was a zoning administrator and wrote the original decision denying refuting the complaint from a member of the Norwich community with regard to the Black Lives Matter sign, because I was already aware of the deficiencies of the Norwich sign regulations as part of the zoning regulations. And I should say here that it's common knowledge amongst zoning administrators in Vermont, and it's certainly I'm aware of many communities having regulations that are not too different from Norwich's, and that they're problematic with regard to the Reed decision. So what I want to say here is that as my role as zoning administrator, I'm aware of the deficiencies, and so I wouldn't be making a decision that would contradict Reed. I would be declining to act in a way that would place the town in a legally challenging situation, and that's the whole point. And the town attorney is also aware of Reed and aware of our regulations, as he is with many other communities that he represents, and would also avoid putting the town in legal jeopardy as a consequence of blind enforcement of our old sign regulations with regard to Reed. The point that I'm also trying to make is that it's no small matter to actually amend the zoning regulations, and it's not easy in Norwich necessarily to do that. The Planning Commission's already committed and has already commenced work on a total rewrite of the land use regulations in Norwich, and this would be part of that. So what I would want to say here is that rather than ignoring Reed, we're finally attending to it along with a whole lot of other issues, and it is hoped that as soon as possible, we can submit for public comment draft land use regulations that reflect contemporary standards, the policies that are in the plan, as well as contemporary case law, and that would include US Supreme Court decisions. So I don't disagree. If you want to send this to the town attorney, that's fine, but I just want to point out that in this instance, the Planning Commission is currently working on the very thing that Marcia's drawing attention to.
Right, and of course we thank Marcia. Marcia said that she asked if she could prepare a memo, and we all agreed, and so this is helpful. And I similarly appreciate our town staff offering their expertise in the matter as well. I think it's important to have both of those documents in our packet on this issue. It's indeed good follow-up, right? So Marcia, do you have any other point to make?
Yeah, I think that just deciding whether something is advertising or not is making a content-based decision. And that's exactly what Reed says not to do. So I think to the extent that this is going forward and no one wants to violate Reed, then making a decision about something, whether it starting off with whether it's advertising or not is problematic. And I think that's what I'd like to see avoided. And I'd like to see more discussion with the attorney on that different question, which is, if that particular question were brought up, would we be likely to prevail?
Okay, thank you.
That satisfies it for me.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. Is there, would any board member like to make a motion further to this, or?
Sorry, the minutes are remaining.
Sorry.
You had the minutes remaining for the.
No, I'm sorry. Thank you, Herb. I'm just clarifying the end. I'm wrapping up this correspondence.
Yep.
So, is there a motion that has any further action to the memo that Marcia brought forward, or can we just vote to receive it? Go ahead, Claudette.
Marcia, it's since Rod had the discussion with the town attorney concerning this case, and the attorney seems to be in the loop. I don't see that there's any additional information that we would garner from the attorney. So I'm not at this point going to support a motion to do anything more.
Okay. If I can just say, what I'm concerned about is that it's a different question. And the question is to the attorney, so how long is it reasonable for us to put this off? How long? It's already been since 2015. We've had one case where we made a content-based decision. How much longer? If this takes, 3 more years, 1 more year, 10 more years, I don't know how long it's going to take. What's reasonable? And having said that, I've done my due diligence to say to the board, I think this is an issue. And if the board doesn't want to send it on to have that answer to that question, that's fine. I've done what I can do.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Marcia. Thank you for that. Okay. Now Herb, I think, was advising me on what motion I should do. So I will take that advice. Go ahead,
I
Herb.
I was thinking you were wrapping up all and you had not had Mary's question in the minutes yet.
Great.
So just want to finish that up before you take a motion to accept the correspondence that was pulled.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's been a thick agenda item. So Mary, what is your correction on the meeting minutes?
Minutes were just that Linda Cook called me tonight and said she's quoted as saying something in the minutes about the veterans, the award for the veterans, but she's not listed as present. So if she could just be listed as present. So that's all it was.
Okay. I think Miranda is noting that. All right, so go ahead, Marcia.
I had sent a tiny correction to Miranda by email for the minutes.
And can you just summarize that correction for the board?
Yes, if I can find it. 1 second.
I think, or just generally, because I think we can support the sentiment.
Maybe Miranda has it, but it's draft minutes. Hold on. Okay, here it is. It is under the paving package, actually, and I just added that Callaway expressed concern about road safety and the need to plan so that we can pave both center lines and fog lines on all roads.
Okay, go ahead, Claudia.
And I had sent Miranda a slight meeting correction, not knowing that she was on vacation, or I would have included others. It had to do with the consent agenda and your question, oh goodness, about the memo to the chairs.
Yes, regarding the posting of meeting minutes.
Yes, hold on, I'll find it as well.
Okay. So for members of the public who are wondering, normally these are received, they make their way into correspondence or the consent agenda.
So-
and those corrections go along. But now we're,
Yeah.
in Miranda's absence, we didn't get them all into the packet. So that's what we're doing now for the record. Go ahead, Claudette.
I said, add Callaway requested pulling all correspondence, and then Callaway asked for explanation on Arnold memo to the board. Arnold explained his memo to the board related to Smith correspondence on open meeting law violations pertaining to draft minute postings. The board agreed by consensus to address open meeting law requirements to all board appointed committees, commissions. Leighton expressed concerns that all groups are trying their best to comply, but things happen. Arnold suggested that Miranda had thoughts on how to comply. That was,
Okay, and so we have, so those were 3 sets of corrections to the 28th, July 28th meeting. So we'll have to vote to, when we vote to receive the correspondence, we'll have to say, we'll have to add those, we'll have to make a motion that references this, okay?
We
So,
good?
so go ahead, Mary. Do you think you can?
Think so. I move to accept correspondence from Stephanie Wolf, Harry Roberts, Sue Lupian, Marcia Callaway, and to accept the minutes as amended.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. All in favor of receiving correspondence? And the meeting minutes? Okay, great, thank you. I think we've now finished our consent agenda, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So now we're going to move on to the municipal solid waste agreement between City of Lebanon and Town of Norwich, and the board will be asked to approve the agreement and a motion will be required. And so we have our representative here in the room. Can you hear me?
no, liquor license.
Oh, right,
Oh,
we
that's
did say
right.
the liquor license, apologies. I
Okay.
was looking at my paper. So Mary, why don't you begin the round of emotions for that liquor license, because we amended the
Okay.
agenda with apologies.
I move to recess as the select board and reconvene as the Norwich Liquor Commission.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, seconded by Rob. Any discussion, any discussion?
No, just fine.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Is there a second motion?
I move to approve the application by American Crafted Spirits, Inc., DBA Silo Distillery for a catering license at King Arthur Flower on August 22nd, 28th, and 29th, 2021, and September 3rd and 11th, 2021.
Is there a second?
second,
Okay, made by Rob. Any discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
Were we supposed to see that license application? Because I don't have it in my packet.
So we added this to the agenda because it was discovered that it was discovered late as something that was needed before our next meeting. And so we added it to the agenda. We don't have the materials in our packet. We have them, we can recite them. We have the physical copies here, which we can recite.
Well, I don't even know who these folks are. Where do they operate?
Silo Distillery.
Yeah.
So it's based in Windsor, and they're doing this for an event relating to JAG Theater on the Hill. You probably saw the stage being constructed if you look over on the hill at King Arthur Flower. And the events are the 22nd, 28th, and 29th of August, and then September 3rd and 11th. They'll be operating from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. So yes, Silo Distillery is what the American Crafted Spirits Incorporated is doing business as. Does that help?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Claudette.
Roger, since I believe Herb had some discussion with the state licensing board, does he know? I would assume that Silo is in good standing with the state liquor control board. If
That's a
not-
great question, and he is saying yes.
Yeah, so if not, I'm sure that the correspondence that Herb shared with us earlier today between him and the state would not have been positive.
Yes, and I thank Herb for getting this together for us and working with the applicant, because it was Bonnie, who does this for us, was on vacation. So Herb got this together for us. So Herb just, I don't know if you heard him, we're short on mics. He said normally Bonnie would just be able to authorize this on her own, but because she's away, I brought it to us. Okay. All right, so I think that ends this thing. I'll call the question. In favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Mayor. Yes.
Just one additional clarity is that you do approve liquor licenses on a normal basis. King Arthur Flour already has the caterer's license that they get on an annual basis that goes through you. But the state has changed its process where the caterers actually have to get a license as well. This is the portion that, but those only have to be approved by the town clerk. So this is one of those things that only has to go through the town clerk after the Liquor Commission, you folks have approved the facility, which is King Arthur Flour, back in whatever it was, April or May. Okay, so that's a new change to the law a year or two ago.
That's great. Thank you for that, Herb. Okay, so last motion, is that right?
I move to reconvene as a select board.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great. We're just ourselves again. Now, as the select board, we can move on to the municipal solid waste agreement, where we'll be asked to approve the agreement. We have our representative, Neil Fulton, here. He has witnessed the first half of our meeting, so he knows that he is going to summarize the changes of the agreement really quickly and beautifully for us.
How much time?
You have 4 to 6 minutes.
There's a considerable amount of information in the packet that I think explains this, so I'm going to give a quick overview. In the year 2000, the city of Lebanon decided in order to take commercial waste and waste from our transfer.
They can't hear our guest. Can you hear him? Can you hear Neil? Okay, we're working.
I have to hold.
The mic is just too far away.
Can you hear him
How
now?
about this?
That works.
Okay. So in the year 2000, the city of Lebanon decided in order to take municipal solid waste to their facility, their landfill in Lebanon, there was going to need to be an agreement between the towns where it came from. We have a transfer station, our commercial haulers that were taking it from that town. So the select board was presented an agreement, which I felt was pretty one-sided. And we didn't really have an option at that point in time. So the select board voted to authorize the chair to sign it, and I happened to be the chair at that time. We've made a couple attempts since the year 2000 to improve and provide better balance to the agreement without success. The city of Lebanon now wants to institute a sort of automated process for people that bring waste directly to the Lebanon landfill. There'll be a sticker with a QR code, and that'll become pretty automatic. So they developed a draft agreement that was quite similar to the 2000 agreement. We've worked with them through our attorney, Nate Stearns, and worked with the attorney for Lebanon, and with the help of the city manager's office and the solid waste director, there were significant modifications made to that agreement. And I think the agreement that is before the board tonight is a significant improvement. Let me just state, if a town, including Norwich, decides not to approve the new agreement, you'll continue to operate under the old agreement, which doesn't make any sense. So if you look at my email of, and I don't know what page of the package it is, I think I've pretty well summarized the issues. So if you turn to their agreement, proposed agreement,
Lost him.
so Henry, is the town going to continue to allow its residents to go directly to the Lebanon landfill for
Can you hear
disposal
him?
of waste?
Can you start that sentence again?
So go back to telling us the two choices, Neil.
And there's three choices on page 3 of the agreement. They break down into really two categories. One category is the select board going to authorize residents of the town of Norwich to take municipal solid waste and other things directly to the Lebanon landfill? And if the answer to that is yes, there's two sub options to that. One is that the residents would make application through the internet to the city of Lebanon to get approval for a permit. The second one is that they all be done through the town clerk, which I think would put a load on the town clerk that I think you'd want to talk to the town clerk before you made that decision, or opt not to allow residents of the town of Norwich to take solid waste directly to the Lebanon landfill. That's the policy decision, I think, that's before you, if you're going to take and approve an agreement, which I think you should. I just want to make one additional comment, is when solid waste from Norwich or any other town in Vermont goes to a facility in Lebanon, unless there's some provisions by the receiver, they're avoiding paying the $6 per ton fee that is required by the state of Vermont to take and support some of their solid waste activities, and also avoid the fee that's levied by the solid waste district to support the activities of the solid waste district. That was 4.5 minutes, I think.
That was excellent. But Claudette and Marcia and Rob, were you able to hear sort of the description of the policy choices, the policy decisions that are outlined in this agreement? Because the motion is ultimately to approve the agreement that outlines his policy choices that Neil just discussed with us. Is that clear? I wasn't sure what was heard.
Yeah, and from a procedural standpoint, you might want to make the decision on those three options first, and then approve the agreement based upon that initial decision.
Okay. Go ahead.
I was wondering if you would know the impact of, like, monetary impact of people from Norwich who might tend to want to take their trash to Lebanon. I was seeing some interest on the listserv that you know, some people found it attractive that would be an option, but would it be a serious impact to the greater Upper Valley Solid Waste District? Or
my suspicion is that the convenience of the Norwich transfer station with the recycling, paint care, and construction debris, that it'll be small. We do know that some of the southern members of the solid waste district, there's significant leakage from those because they don't really have another place to take it. And we've been told that the town of Hartford, which serves some of the southern communities, we have a coupon system where we buy them from them and sell them to our members, has told us that in June of 2020, they will no longer take waste from anybody other than the town of Hartford.
that's a change for our residents.
Yes, and I think probably the only residents from this town probably only take major CP.
Can't hear him.
Which now collects C and D at our transfer station.
Okay, we're gonna try to get to the break, and then we're gonna reevaluate our meeting. Neil, can you remember where you were in your conversation?
The question that was asked by Mary was, do I think there'd be significant leakage from the town of Norwich if people had the ability to take materials directly to the Lebanon landfill? And I said, I didn't think there'll be significant leakage, but we are experiencing that with some of the southern towns within the greater Upper Valley districts. And to be very clear, people that are doing that are avoiding a $6 franchise fee that is admitted by the state. As I look at that, Lebanon ought to be actually including in their fee the cost of that, but they're not willing to do that. So right now, because those two fees are not there, it's significantly cheaper to take it to Lebanon landfill.
Go ahead, Marcia.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea that Norwich has the right to prohibit a person from taking their refuse to another town.
Is there a question?
Yes. What's the basis for that? I mean, a person lives in a given town, and if another town will take their refuse, why would Norwich have to give them permission to go to that other town?
Well, because Lebanon has basically said they will not allow the resident of town, one that doesn't have an agreement similar to the agreement that's before the board tonight, and if the town doesn't authorize that to take place. So is it a form of flow control? It may be, but Lebanon is setting the rules of this game.
And yet you said, can I,
Go ahead, Marcia.
so you also said if we didn't sign this, we would revert to the old agreement, which, as you said, was a little odd. But apparently under the old agreement, people were able to go and use that facility without permission from Norwich.
That is correct, but Lebanon has said as of September 1st of this year, if there is not a new agreement signed by the town that has made a choice as part of that agreement to allow residents of the town of Norwich to take their trash to Lebanon, they will not accept it. In other words, they'll turn people around at the gate. And so I don't know whether they have that authority or not. It's their facility, so I suspect they can decide who comes in.
Okay, Rob, did you have a question?
Yeah. Through this agreement, are we subsidizing in any way the cost of town residents taking their trash to Lebanon?
I'm looking for an easy question. I think, Rob, it depends on what you call subsidizing. If, for example, there was a 20% reduction in the amount of trash from Norwich that went directly to Lebanon, then based upon my understanding of the economics of the transfer station, you got a lot of fixed costs. And so in order to take and maintain, I don't know if you're trying for 80% or 90% to be covered by user fees, the answer would be yes.
So is there a direct cost to Norwich by signing the agreement? Does Lebanon charge the town of Norwich anything specific?
Well, the only direct cost would be if there was significant leakage, which I don't think there will be, to the Lebanon landfill by people bypassing the transfer station.
Go ahead, Claudette. Did you have a question?
And yeah, and let's not forget, people have been taking their trash to Lebanon already. So it's, and the ones that take it to Lebanon are going to continue to take it to Lebanon. The ones that don't, won't, in my opinion.
Well, apparently they won't be allowed to.
Well,
they
if
don't have
we
permission.
agree that town residents can take their trash to Lebanon, then yes, they would be. So
Right.
to me, it's
Yeah, if you look at option 3, actually, I think probably option 3 is what I'm hearing is not really where some members of the select board want to go. If you want to look at the first option, which would be the second one, they still could take it to Lebanon. They would need to have a permit issued by the city of Lebanon for them to gain access to the Lebanon landfill.
right.
Which they would fill out on.
So we'd fill out online, yes.
Or else through our clerk, and there might be further discussion with that.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the least controversial decision, if there is one, would be the option that the town of Norwich opts to allow residents to obtain individual permits directly from the city through an online portal. And then those that wanted to continue to take their MSW and other things to the Lebanon landfill could. And one of the other things in this agreement is that they have made a commitment that they will track that information once they have an automated system. And so the Lebanon town manager and the select board in the future could see how much leakage there was and determine whether there should be a change made in that.
Yeah, that would be smart.
Okay, we go ahead, Claudette, and then we have a public comment, and then
Yeah, and I just kind of like going along with Marcia's earlier comment. I don't think the select board should be saying, no Norwich resident, you can't take your trash to Lebanon. That to me is ridiculous.
okay. I'm gonna take a public comment. Could you just come forward, sir, and then Neil's gonna pass the mic to you. Just state your name and locatable address for us.
My name is Bram Litvinoff. I'm at 105 Academy Road. I've been taking my trash to the landfill for years and years. Prices have gone up there, but they are nowhere near the price of, say, Hartford. Hartford is 3+ times more than what Lebanon costs. Lebanon is $75 a ton. Hartford is over 200. Prices are for low and middle income people. Lebanon is the place to go. We group our errands in West Lebanon. We're shopping. It saves us on fuel. And I think an easy solution, those that want to sign up online, let them. Those that want to sign up on the clerk with the clerk, charge a little more than the $10 if you're concerned about the money that's concerned about. I couldn't really hear you, but there was concern about a $6 fee of some kind. And
Go ahead, Neil. Can you just clarify what you said?
Yeah, the state of Vermont in 2015, about the time the universal recycling law was passed, established a fee that all trash, MSW, solid waste generated in Vermont, whether it went out of state or not, needed to pay $6 a ton for that. That I don't think is the responsibility of the town of Norwich to police that, but that's very much in statute. And just for clarity, it's a binary option. If the town of Norwich wants people to take it, the binary option is either the online portable or the clerk, not both.
No, it's not.
Right, that's what I understood too.
Okay.
But this gentleman, you were suggesting that was a possibility for us in your public comment. Would you like to just pass the mic and then finish your public comment for us?
yeah, they will snap residents off on September 1st if this isn't signed and allowing residents to go. It is a huge savings. And I understood that it was, you could sign up for free online, or you could pay $10 at your clerk to offset the cost of their time doing the permitting. I didn't realize it was an either or.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm going to take one more public comment, and then I'll come to you, Marcia, and then I would like to move on some actions on this. I underestimated our enthusiasm for this agreement. I don't know who FHW is. Can you just identify yourself for us first?
Yes, can you hear me all right? Can you hear
Go
me?
ahead.
Okay. Yes, Frank Welder, Glen Ridge Road. Quite honestly, I don't understand why this is even being discussed. I was glad to hear Claudette say the word ridiculous. That pretty much sums it up. Yes, there's a landfill within 5 miles of my home that I can go to for much cheaper than the Norwich transfer station, and I prefer going there now. I haven't been going there for the longest time, but I tell you, the first time I went, I was much more happy there. The people are there are, I have to say, they like doing their job, and they do it very, very well. I can't say that about the Norwich transfer station at all times. Again, I have to go back to the word ridiculous. This is just silly. This should not even be on the agenda. Quite honestly, the only choice here is to let the market drive the economy, and the market pricing will do it, not the select board. Norwich has no business telling me where I can take my trash. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Claudette, Marcia was first, and then Claudette, and then we're gonna take some motions. Go ahead, Marcia.
I think the reason it's on the agenda is because we needed to sign it And then we just have to make a choice here. And I think I know which choice I'm interested in. I'm just kind of concerned. I'm thinking about the second option, which would allow residents to obtain their permits through the city of Lebanon, which would spare our town clerk from extra work. So I think that would be a good idea. The only thing that I would worry about, and I was going to ask for the input of Brian and Frank to see if they thought that that was something that would be onerous for people. Not all people have access to technology so that they can do something online. And then apart from that, I just wanted to note that on page 60 of the materials, whatever page it is of the agreement, it says that there's a non-competition clause and we can't go with another service. And so is that at all a worry to the Solid Waste Committee?
So I'll note that question for Neil, but let's take Claudette's comment. Thank you, Marcia.
I was just going to respond to Mr. Weld, I believe his name was, just that it's on the agenda because the select board needs to sign or needs to decide and needs to sign this agreement. That's why it's on the agenda.
Yes, it says so in the action column. Yes, so Neil, can you just, Marcia's concerned about the compete clause?
Yeah, if you look in on page 5 of mine, in the non-compete clause, there's an exception there that refers to item D, which allows us more flexibility than was allowed by the 2000 agreement. So planning could actually go on to move to an alternative facility. We need to give Lebanon time to adjust to that, but if it doesn't preclude us from going to an alternative facility, which the original agreement did. Secondly, Lebanon landfill is significantly cheaper than the other landfills in the area. Casella has a facility in Lebanon, and one of the southern solid waste districts took bids. Their price was probably $30 per ton more than we're paying in Lebanon. The next closest facility, Lebanon's close. The next closest facility is in Bethlehem, New Hampshire, which is also owned by Casella. And I think there's only 5 facilities, permitted facilities in New Hampshire. So that may change in the future, but I doubt we're going to find something cheaper than Lebanon in the next 10 years.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Claudette. Is this a motion, I hope?
Yep, it was.
Great,
So I
thank
move
you.
to approve the proposed municipal solid waste agreement between the city of Lebanon and the town of Norwich as contained in the meeting packet, and to authorize the town manager to sign said agreement on behalf of the town, and to allow Norwich residents to utilize the Lebanon transfer station or Lebanon landfill.
And sign up for permit via the online portal? Perhaps?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Made by Claudette, seconded by Mary. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. That was definitely the 10 minutes that we allotted for this, but I think we answered a lot of questions.
But the record show, I took 4.5.
That's true, you did. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
I really appreciate
Trash is
that.
a hot topic in this
It
town.
is.
Trash.
It is. All right, thank you everyone so much. All right, so let's move on to number 5, the proposed solar generation project at Upper Leveling Road, Norwich Solar Technologies. In this case, we're going to be asked to accept the recommendation from the Planning Commission to support this project, and then a motion is required. There was a lot of material in our packet, and I think some folks from Norwich Solar Technologies are here to potentially offer a presentation. I just wanted to clarify one thing before we begin, which is that the 2020 town plan and the energy chapter 3.2, as Rod Francis points out in his July 3rd memo, that was part of the packet, that solar generation projects that are sized from 15 kilowatt to 500 kilowatt, the presumption is that all of Norwich meets that Public Utility Commission definition of preferred site. notwithstanding the existing areas of local concern, including the Ridgeline Protection Overlay Area. And then this site that we're going to be talking about is located in the Ridgeline Protection Overlay Area and therefore does not automatically qualify as a preferred site in the town plan. Thus, a different process is triggered, and that is why we are here today following the Planning Commission's presentation as well. So I did want to summarize that. So would it make sense for folks to hear a little bit from Norwich Solar Technologies first? As an approach?
Yes.
I'm seeing yes from Rob. Marcia, Claudette, would you like to do that? Or would you like to take a different action?
It doesn't matter to me. I watched the planning commission meeting
Okay.
presentation. So
Touche.
I'm going to have questions, but
Okay, so why don't we, let's take some questions then. Marcia, would you like to begin with some questions?
sure. I'm just concerned because I don't know that there's any statement or provision in the town plan, and certainly nothing was mentioned in this application about any of the habitat blocks and connectivity issues for animals. And when I looked today on the Vermont Biofinder for that particular address on Upper Loveland Road, it looked to me like it was a habitat connectivity area, which would mean that the 9 acres of cutting forest and the 2 acres of plastic solar panels could disrupt animals significantly and cause a problem. So even though the Agency of Natural Resources was copied on this, it's been my experience that nobody will raise their hand and say, oh yes, this is a problem. So I'd like to have feedback from them before we take any action on this, because I think we have real worries about climate change that, might be addressed on the one hand with things like solar and might be harmed on the other hand by ruining the habitats of animals that actually benefit us in other ways. So before moving on this, I would definitely like to hear from the Agency of Natural Resources and have them explain in particular where this fits on that habitat block and connectivity schema.
Okay, Marcia, would you like to hear from the applicant or Rod Francis, who may or may not have been in touch with that department?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'd also like to know who exactly is going to benefit from this. Is this going to be money that's in the pocket of the developer? This is a large field, so I'd like to know who's getting the benefit here. So those 2 questions.
Okay, that's great. Why don't we, do any other board members have questions? Otherwise, I'll ask our applicant to address Marcia's questions. So why don't we do that? Rod Francis, I see that your hand is up. Would you like to address these questions first? Is that what that hand means?
Yes, it does actually.
Okay.
Let me, and I just wanted to say at the outset, I don't mean to speak across Troy here, who has come prepared for a presentation, but I wanted to make it clear to the public and to the select board that the Agency of Natural Resources is a party to the Certificate of Public Good proceedings that will happen under Rule 5100 as this application proceeds, and they're obligated under statute to review any such application like this with regard to their own policies, and that includes the mapping that Marcia was able to see on the Agency of Natural Resources Natural Resource Atlas this afternoon. So to be clear, the point I want to make here is that the town's jurisdiction doesn't extend to that. We don't determine or define habitat blocks, and we don't enforce around habitat blocks. We don't review for habitat blocks. That's the purview and the jurisdiction of the Agency of Natural Resources, which is why it didn't come up. I'd respectfully suggest that the select board also does not have the authority to review habitat blocks in this instance. So I acknowledge that Marcia is concerned that under some circumstances, perhaps it won't get the attention that it's due. That's a reasonable concern, but ultimately the town is bound by the way is bound by statute. And so the town does not actually enjoy the authority to review forest blocks. And moreover, even if you were to invite the Agency of Natural Resources, assuming that they were available, I suspect that their response would be that their appropriate response would be with, in the form of a hearing for the certificate of public good. And so Troy has actually been through several of these, of course, so he can speak in more detail about that, but I want to make clear that the town has no authority in this regard.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Troy, would you like to add anything to that, to Marcia's question?
Yes, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And as Rod is indicating, that we hire environmental consultants as part of the application process, and the town is a party to that process, and the Agency of Natural Resource works closely with us and our environmental consultant to make sure that we follow all environmental regulations and that we do not disturb wetlands, sensitive plants, and habitat. So it is definitely part of the process, and it's definitely something that we look to be environmental stewards on. One of the big advantages of this project is that it's not seen from any public way. And so there's been definitely some strong considerations in Norwich for having solar arrays be at most seen at a glimpse. And so this particular project is a good example of one that is not going to be seen from any public way or homes. And also this is a private property, and there are some trails there. It does border on some town land, and we commit to having this continue to be open to the public, and so we believe that this is a good use for the property. There was the question about a developer and who benefits from these projects. I would be remiss not to mention that that's outside the scope of this, but it's something we're very proud of. As a company, we're 35 people, local Vermonters. We're based in White River Junction. We provide good wages. We're voted a 2021 best place to work, and all of these community solar arrays provide solar credits to local Vermont individuals, businesses, nonprofits, towns, municipalities. They see savings from that. So there's broad-based benefits, including environmental, social, and economic. I just happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Yeah, just to pin it down, I think Marcia was looking for I think could there be an explanation of how these projects are financed, and how and who are the beneficiaries of the financing structures. So I think that was more in the spirit of the question. You can answer that didactically and broadly as you wish, just as a reminder to the public.
So we finance projects a number of different ways, and so projects in Norwich to date, for example, one is owned by a local resident and serves low and moderate income housing in the Star Lake region. One is owned by individuals through residential community solar, and half owned by another Norwich individual who then provides discounted power to the Norwich Fire District and the town of Fairleigh. There's another solar array that is hosted by the Norwich Fire District, provide lease payments to the Norwich Fire District. That's financed by an individual investor, and that provides credits and benefits to King Arthur Flour. And so all of these projects provide multiple benefits to many parties. We're bringing dollars into the state from the federal tax credit, from the federal tax rules, and from both local investors and investors in the New England region. So a number of our solar projects are bank financed with local banks. Mascoma Bank and Claremont Bank are great partners. VSECU is a great partner. Then we have individuals, both local and regional in New England, that are investors in solar projects, bringing money into the state, paying good wages, and also providing savings to customers throughout Vermont.
Okay, thank you. Marcia, did you get answers to your questions?
Yeah, I have a follow-up. So we didn't see fit to put anything about habitat connectors in our town plan. We did have protection supposedly for ridge lines. And now we're asked to abandon that protection in this particular case. And I'm just wondering, yes, jurisdictionally, there will be a review and various components of the government will look at this, including the Agency of Natural Resources. But I'm just wondering, I'll find this out myself independently, but I will ask the question, if the Agency of Natural Resources said they didn't agree with this, would the vote by the Select Board trump anything that any agency might have for objection?
Yeah,
Troy unmuted himself, so maybe he'll.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer this, and happy also for Rod to provide some information. This is the very first step in the process. So this does not trump any of the Public Utilities Commission proceedings. It is really just a gating step in the process. And then just noting on the ridgeline protection overlay, the ridgeline protection overlay is for scenic view, and that's why we've been very diligent and careful in showing that we are not impacting the ridgeline view from any public highway or road or even house. So that's where we're protecting the ridgeline viewshed with this project.
So just to be clear, if I may, Marcia, so if the Agency of Natural Resources finds that this doesn't conform to standards set for protecting these wilderness blocks,
Habitat connectors,
the wilderness connectors, that trumps any decision that we render here. I think, just to be clear, do you have a sense of yes or no on that? And maybe I'll turn to Rod. He can help us with that, and then I'll go ahead. Rod, can you help answer that Marcia's question clearly?
So let me try and be clear. So Troy's correct. There's a review process that Troy's firm and the applicants, the property owners, are in the process of going through with the Public Utility Commission. This is the first step. As part of the process for obtaining a certificate of public good from the Public Utility Commission, state agencies have what they are called intervenor status in those hearings. If any one of the statutory parties, including the Agency of Natural Resources, have got serious concerns, they can do two things, and they normally do both. They informally articulate their concerns with the applicant. In this case, that will be Troy and his firm. If there's an inadequate response, or Troy's firm's response is that we would like to take this, plan unchanged to the Public Utility Commission, and we'll argue our case there, then the Agency of Natural Resources can make representations before the commission on the basis of their statutory authority. To be really clear, the town at this time has no authority to comment or to provide an opinion or to attempt to prevent this from going forward on the basis of the existence of mapped habitat blocks. To be clear about that, the process that the town follows in an instance like this is generally to delineate between ridgeline protection areas and other designated areas that are designated through the zoning process. So if you look at the zoning maps, you'll see the ridgeline overlay is one of those maps that was duly adopted as part of the zoning regulations in 2009. And so that's what we can enforce around. That the concern about forest blocks and habitat blocks has come subsequent to that, are important for policy reasons, but they're not germane to this question. And so the town plan identifies forest blocks as a key issue, and it also identifies encouraging renewable energy resources as an issue. And so it set the level at quite clearly at if the project proposed is outside the ridgeline overlay district, then it's presumed to be a preferred site. And if it's in the ridgeline overlay area, it's not. And then the planning commission renders a decision as to whether the proposed project has an impact on the ridgeline overlay area within, and there it references the language of the ridgeline overlay area itself, which, as Troy correctly pointed out, is an aesthetic consideration, not a habitat quality or habitat value judgment. It's a visual aesthetic judgment. So we don't have the ability in the plan policy wise to review habitat blocks.
Okay, right, which is why your memo to originally to the planning commission, and now that we have discussed it as section 3.13 of the Norwich zoning regulations extensively,
Correct.
because that is what we are
Correct.
asked to use for the standard of review. Okay,
Correct.
Great. Any further questions or comments? Go ahead, Marcia, and then I'm going to ask everyone else, and then we'll maybe move on if that's okay. Go ahead, Marcia.
So it is within our purview because it's here in front of us. And it's here in front of us because this is different. And it is, Mary. It's here because we are going to have to make a decision about this and say whether we say this is ridgeline and it's a primary whatever site you. And I think that's can't be lost. And the fact that the town plan didn't provide for habitat connectors is now coming to bite us, and it will potentially come to bite us in the future. And I'm hoping sincerely that the Agency of Natural Resources will take a good hard look at this, because I'd like to know why we don't first and foremost look at brownfields. I'm looking at all sorts of stuff on the internet that talks about, you know, the concerns, and I took a continuing legal education course on solar siting and energy siting. And, you know, basically people are saying the best case scenario is for people to choose brownfields. And this is going to come back to bite us as we go forward. So I would say if this was coming to us and you said this should be a preferred site and it's a brownfield, maybe so, but not a ridge line, which is, by the look of the biofinder, a habitat connector. I'm concerned about the harm that we're doing if we say this should be a preferred site.
Right. Thank you, Marcia. And I would hope that the Agency of Natural Resources would share your concern in their review, right? That's what I would say. And so what I will offer is, like, if Miranda can make sure that they are clearly expressed in our meeting minutes, your point, right? So that
Thank
way
you.
it will make its way through discourse, right? Any other board members have anything? Thank you, Marcia.
I have one thing to say.
Okay.
Just that I appreciated the different sight lines that were explored. Since it is a ridge line, it is sensitive for scenic reasons. And they made sense to me. I was impressed by how thorough that was.
Any further discussion or questions? Do we have any motions?
I move to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission and provide a letter of support as drafted by the Planning Director to Norwich Technologies for their proposed solar generation project on Upper Loveland Road.
Is there a second? Seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, roll
Did
call.
you? No,
Roll
okay.
call. Rob, how do you vote? I can't hear you.
Yes.
Claudette, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia, how do you vote?
No,
And I am a yes. Okay, thank you.
Can I just point out to Marcia too, that the abutters and especially the abutters, and I believe even members of the town can submit testimony to the PUC when this comes up, if there's opposition, and they'll listen to you.
thank you.
Troy is nodding.
Yeah, and please, yeah, the select board themselves and you as individuals. Please review our plans. Please contact us directly with any concerns, but then also, if we're not addressing them, please please put all your comments to the Public Utilities Commission. It is a in-depth process, and we appreciate all of the feedback that goes on in that.
I will do.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Claudette. Let's move on to the town manager report. We're a little over time. So we were going to hear an update on significant happenings. I made some space in the agenda for the possible IT vendor recommendation because Herb had hoped to move that to us as soon as it was available, but it is being finalized for our work on the 25th. Nonetheless, let's hear an update on significant happenings, Herb.
But just since you mentioned can everybody hear me before okay, good, yeah. Since you mentioned the IT proposal, I did send to all the board members and the folks that participated in the process of the review team in because it was large, put it in a Dropbox for the board members. So you should have all seen that. I tried to have it ready for this particular meeting, but due to the extent of the review and getting a nice summary together for you folks, I wasn't able to make the packet in time, but I have sent it to you so that you can begin to review it with the idea that we can approve this at your subsequent meeting in a couple weeks. So if you do have questions on that before we get there, feel free to shoot me emails or what have you. The people that I just want to thank from that standpoint are Jerry Tolman, a citizen that volunteered his time throughout that process to review proposals and meeting with the interviews of the finalists. Obviously, Rob Gear is a member of the board, me, and then Claire and Rod Francis, who's the planning and zoning director and knows a little bit more than I do to be dangerous in the network, is the way I termed it. So has some background. And I think we had, 4 really good interviews and finalists. And as you review the stuff and it comes forward to you formally for the next meeting, be happy to answer any questions on that. With my written report, I think you get a sense that my office is being pulled in a bunch of different directions. As I finish up my contract here, the finance director will come on board in September, but I won't be here to do onboarding. But that position for now, I'm just trying to stay up to speed with that, with the pre-audit going on. Larry Wiggins submitted his second retirement, so he's now gone. I've been basically serving with Neil Rich to keep the Public Works Department running. We have an interim police chief, and Simon's doing that well to keep the department going and holding that together. We also just advertised for an equipment operator. We have another crew member from DPW that has moved on. So that advertising has gone out there. So the staff situation is a little, I don't know what the term is, haphazard at best right now, but I'm trying to fill all the roles that I
Carefully
can.
managed.
Yes.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on. We are continuing to try to move forward. One thing I want to keep mentioning is that in the transition with me, Rod will be serving as the acting manager in the interim of you folks pointing something or whatever you're going to do with that particular position. So I'm trying to quickly cross-train him on the things that I'm dealing with. One of those major things is the Moore Lane Bridge with some wooden bridge, which has some creosote dripping on that. Been dealing with the state, trying to keep them from fining us, trying to get at least a short-term solution with a long-term solution going on. So that's ongoing. And if you have, I'll leave the written stuff as is in case you have any other questions. But a couple other things in the packet. There was a couple updates, but one specifically, Bonnie Batchelder, your auditor, finished her review of the net metering agreements and the billing for that. She did not have any findings with regard to that, meaning the contract is being adhered to as was intended. So there are no issues on that, which is, I know that response has been long in coming, so I'm glad that we were able to finish that up. And I think in the interest of time, Roger, unless there was something else you'd specifically like me to touch on, I'll leave it for questions.
Thanks, Herb. I really appreciate that. Can you just quickly touch base on sort of what we saw in the warrant regards to the fire hydrant repair?
Oh, sure. Yep.
And just sort of some of your baseline thinking on that at the time.
Yep.
At this moment, rather.
Yep. Sorry. So the back back in the probably May timeframe, there was a hydrant that essentially was shut off during training, was shut off too fast. When you shut off a hydrant too fast, I can't remember what the term is, but it effectively, you know what that is. What's the term? Thank you. Water hammering. So when you turn a hydrant off too fast, you create a hammer, a water hammer that can damage the water lines and sometimes the hydrants as well. That happened back in the May timeframe. The hydrants and the water lines essentially belong to the fire district. So we're basically liable for that damage. That was in the AP warrant of about $9,000 for the repair work. The situation there is that we do not have a budgeted amount, a line item to address that because it was a fire department issue. I had to create a line item under the typical area where we would do that, which is in the general category of support under the fire department. So there is a line item there that's termed water line repair. That's where the $9,000 is coming from as part of that expense. Roger asked me earlier today if that was something that possibly could be considered an insurance item. That's something I'll have to research a little bit further. If it can be considered, we still have to pay that. And if it is considered something that could be covered by insurance, we would be reimbursed $8,000 for that with a $1,000 deductible. So I'll definitely look into that. This is one of these situations that crew members with the fire department are trained. I can tell you the trainer was part of the issue. So this is something that we need to be further. I've already had discussions with the chief on this, and they're trying to make sure that they do a better job of not have the water hammering. I do know that hydrants can get sensitive over time, so sometimes you can't help it. But basically continuing the training is what we need to do so that we try to minimize these accidents from happening.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. Any board members have any questions for her town manager report? Can you hear me? Did you hear my question? Yeah, okay, so I don't know if you heard, I'm asking if you had anybody had any questions for her. Go ahead, Marcia.
Not for her, but for you. I'd like to probably ask if we could have at some point a discussion about where we're going to be heading for interim hiring for a town manager.
Yes, so that's item number 7. So we can just, it's coming right up.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Claudette?
Sorry, I just heard something weird outside. I think it was an owl. Do we have any applicants for the DPW director position?
We have, actually, we received only 4 applicants, but I would say I'm having all 4 of them interviewed because they actually, in some fashion or other, are all qualified to take on the position. So those will be scheduled next week, hopefully late next week, with the idea that I can try to get somebody on board before the transition, or at least close enough where Rod won't have to worry about too much in dealing as an acting manager. The other thing too is that we finally have the general job description for the working foreman done. So I'll be advertising internally for that before the end of the week.
And will the DPW crew be involved in the interview process?
I'm involving Masaki, who's the administrative assistant up there. I'm also asking Rod to be part of that. And then I'm asking Rita Cito from Two Rivers Ottaquiche Regional Commission to be part of that, since she's the transportation planner there and has a lot of experience in dealing with planners. And that's essential, short of Masaki, that's essentially the same type of review panel that I had when we were interviewing for when Larry came on board.
I would respectfully suggest that having at least one member of the DPW crew would be a good addition to that interview group.
Yep. If I have a working foreman appointed by that time frame, that would be the likely person involved in that process. Beyond that, I probably will not include a crew member for various reasons that I would prefer not to discuss publicly.
Okay. Any further questions for Herb? Go ahead, Marcia.
And I understand that there was a couple of applicants for the police officer position, and are we starting from scratch? Where do we stand with that?
So both of those candidates did not pass their background checks. At this point, I've not received a name of any other candidates, either directly with my office or through the interim chief, Simon Keeling.
But it remains posted in all of the same posting places, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the chief is certainly where he is trying to make contact with folks to drum up some applicants. He's definitely working on that as aggressively as he can.
Thank you.
Okay. Herb, as a segue into the next item, could you just talk about, Herb has reiterated to me that he's committed to working for the town of Norwich until the very last day of his contract. And so Herb, can you just, as part of the transition to the next agenda item, talk about some of the, how you're transitioning sort of your email inbox and your passwords and sort of anything like that on a broad level, so the board could have that benefit of that update.
So essentially what I'm doing is I'm having individual discussions with department heads and relevant staff as it pertains to projects that they may have that the town manager needs to know about, and therefore to transition into for Rod at least, and also vice versa. If there's anything on my desk that needs to be completed, what I'm trying to do is ensure that there's a designated staff person or department head that has that, so that I try to maintain a level of seamlessness between and among particular projects that are going on. Also, As I said, Rod will be the acting manager moving forward until you folks decide on another course of action or position or person in the position. What I'm just, sorry, Roger, I'm trying to remember the other half of your question. So
I think sort of any sort of IT related transitions.
Oh,
for
sorry,
things
right.
like,
So
password security and emails.
Yep, sorry, thank you.
No, thank you.
So what I do is I keep the passwords and everything. What I will be doing before I head out is to have essentially a single sheet of paper that I'll have all that spelled out from the booklet that I have, and that will be given to Miranda for her safekeeping to be able to transition to the next. And then as Rod comes and takes over, he should change those passwords and that sort of such as applicable. And then again, with a new person coming on board, that again, those should be changed again. But essentially Miranda will be the keeper of those. They will not be given to the board. They will not be given to anybody else, but retained with the town manager's office. Secondly, in a transition standpoint, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on my in terms of the transitional person from that standpoint. I'm just trying to make sure that I got all the passwords and everything done. Transitioning at that point, Miranda will be the keeper of that. And then appropriately, Rod would become signatory or what have you for the certain actions that need to be taken care of after I've left.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've made sure with relevant staff is that they're welcome to call me afterward if there's something that they can't find from that standpoint. And then, sorry, lastly, the point I wanted to make is that if there's anything that's sort of, I'm in cleaning up my desk as a for instance, the idea is that for those projects that I have going on right now, I'll have the relevant pile, if you will, or piles on my desk. I did the same thing when I left Fairhaven, Vermont, and that is that I'll have some kind of a status or direction that something needs to head in for each of those particular projects, so that whoever sits there should be able to pick it up, whether I've talked to somebody about it or not.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Herb. I wanted the board to have the benefit of, you had previously outlined that to me when we planned the agenda. So I just wanted the board members to hear that. Can we move on to item 7? Can you hear me? Sorry, no.
Apparently they can't. Oh, someone.
Yeah, so Claudette just has a question then. Go ahead, Claudette.
Yes, I am wondering, Roger, what your communication with VLCT has been like. What have they been able to provide you with names of potential interim managers?
Okay. So let's move on to item number 7 then.
Oh, yeah, I thought that was.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry.
So no, it's okay. So thank you for the town manager report. Herb, let's go to the update on the interim town manager process. So to answer your question, Claudette, just to reiterate, there was a motion at our last meeting to authorize to have a conversation with VLCT to assist with an interim town manager search. The motion didn't authorize me, but I assumed. So I did reach out to VLCT, and there's a couple answers. So one, they have a consultant who does larger recruitment services for a long-term town manager situation, and the way that they have assisted municipalities with interim town managers, from what I was told, is they just retain sort of a list of folks who they know who are retired, who are willing to serve as consultants for situations like these, and they make contact and make a series of email introductions. They had reached out to 3 names on our behalf, and they indicated that they were not available at this time. And then there was one someone who had been a town administrator for another community, not a town manager, who may be available. In hearing that, I inquired also at Herb's suggestion to Municipal Resources, Inc. Because they had also worked with the town of Hartford for both their interim and long-term searches for a town manager. So I solicited, I sent an inquiry, but have not heard back directly. So to answer your message, Claudette, there is one municipal manager who was identified from VLCT for a possible further conversation. In hearing the results of that, I reached out to Municipal Resources, Inc. For more information. So that is where I'm at right now with what the board made motions for. Any clarity that I should add for that part? Go ahead, Claudette.
So are we getting VLCT to actually do, or contacting or connecting with the recruiting firm?
So the way that I understood it, or at least what it was to my mind, is I was not authorized to begin a full-time, long-term search via their consultant services for that. I reached out to them for some names for interim assistants, and as you just heard, I was not given names.
Question was going to be, should we as a board then move or make a motion to authorize you to oh gosh, I'm getting brain dead. To contract with VLCT for a search, or with VLCT's. You know what I'm trying to say? I'm just not saying it well.
I think what you're trying to say is, would it make a difference if we engage deeper services from VLCT or others, in this process, like rather than sort of a more informal inquiry where we're being offered some names for a conversation, but rather like do some actual recruitment services?
Yes.
Is that
yes.
Okay? And as Herb points out, there's obviously cost for recruitment services. VLCT was performing this other work by extension of our membership to the organization. Okay, go ahead, Marcia.
I'm seeing this as two separate things. We've got an interim situation and we've got a long-term situation. For the interim situation, I find it odd that the person who would be employed by the board, the town manager, interim or otherwise, would be appointed by the person who's no longer the town manager after that point. I think that strikes me as uniquely odd. And I would be more interested in researching quickly the person who seems to be available, the person with town administrator experience, to see if they're available to step in smoothly and take over when the end of Herb's tenure arrives, September 1. And then simultaneously move forward with VLTC or whomever for a longer term search.
Right, so let me just make a couple of comments so I can understand what you're saying. So I think, yes, I think as Claudette said, the longer sort of recruitment for a town manager is like a wider conversation and really not even what we're talking about in this agenda item. For the interim town manager search, there was one name of a municipal manager. I'm happy with the board's motion or otherwise to begin sort of an introductory conversation and perhaps get them to meet with us. I'm happy to do that if that's one of the motions. But I think the other thing you're saying is you are questioning the appropriateness of our current town manager appointing and acting at this moment, and whether or not that is any statutory issues or just in general, whether or not it is appropriate. Is that sort of the gist of what you're saying?
I'm
Okay.
not thinking that there's anything statutorily except that the town manager is hired by the select board.
Yes, and the only thing I will say is there is no words like acting or interim are not defined in statute. If they are appointed, they are effectively the town manager. So I think the only thing I will say is like, August 30th is fast approaching, right? I think it makes sense I think it's actually generous of Herb to begin thinking about some of his duties with someone in-house. If you are suggesting there should be a board motion to affirm that decision, I think that's also appropriate.
Yeah, I'm suggesting, right now, Rod's pretty busy and he should stay doing what he's doing. And the town manager position is really about finances and money. And I would actually suggest that maybe we consider the town treasurer for the position of interim. I mean, my first preference would be that we could maybe work out something with this town administrator. But if that wasn't possible, the person that might most efficiently pick up the reins might be the town treasurer.
So Herb is suggesting, others in the room are suggesting that would statutorily, that would actually not be permissible. So, but yes.
Someone with
Okay, so Marcia's putting something forward. Can I get some thoughts by some other folks? So I think Claudette is saying like, can we sort of authorize or affirm for Roger to, have this conversation and get something scheduled for this group? That's one part of it. I think so I would like to hear from others. And the second part of the question is whether or not we can affirm the appointed acting if necessary, or if because of the transition won't necessarily work out in terms of timing. Mary, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I'd like to move to affirm Herb Durfee's choice of Rod as our acting manager before we have an interim.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Let's have a discussion. We have a public comment. Go ahead, Neil Fulton. You need a mic, sir. You need a mic, sir.
When I retired, what the select board did was appoint an interim. There's nothing in the statute that talks about acting, but so you.
Or interim.
The select board appointed an interim.
Can they
Hold on,
hear?
hold on. They can't,
can't
I don't know
hear.
what's going on with this mic.
When I left, and this has happened
Can
in
you
the.
hear him now? Okay. So just
When
to
I left, the
summarize-
select board appointed an interim. It happened to be the interim I recommended because you need a interim manager that has the full statutory capability of what's laid out in statutes. So I don't know where Herb is on this, but my view is an acting always has been a person that acts on behalf of the existing manager and should be making decisions as if the manager had made it. An interim has full independent authority.
Okay.
So my suggestion would be
a
that
friendly amendment to
the
your
motion be to appoint an interim.
All right. I withdraw my first motion. I'd like to move to support Rod Francis as interim town manager until we can locate another person.
Okay. Is there a
Second that one.
Okay, second to that amended motion. So you've seconded the friendly amendment, I believe is how we would phrase that. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, I would wonder if until we can get until we can get another interim manager in here, if we can talk to Cheryl or connect with Cheryl and see if she would be willing to be, I don't know, be a little bit more, assist Rod in the financial pieces of things.
Okay. I mean,
Make that
okay.
There is a statute that lays out incompatible offices. And the treasurer and the town manager are incompatible offices. The treasurer really needs to be independent.
Yeah, I'm just to reiterate that public comment. Thank you, Neil. I'm surprised by, I'm really surprised. First of all, that I'm surprised by that suggestion because I think the statute is actually clear on that. But
Which statute is that? Since there seems to be
the
other
statute for
treasurer.
incompatible offices.
Pardon me?
Sorry, the statute for incompatible offices.
I'm looking.
Any, it looks like 17 VSA.
I think it's in Title 17.
Okay.
That would be elections. I think we should probably.
I didn't LexisNexis this. I think we can trust. I think we can trust our previous public and current officials on incompatible.
It's kind of a separation of powers. It shouldn't overlap. I'm kind of surprised that you guys are bringing that up. I'm very surprised.
Well, Rod's on record saying how busy he is, and I think that that's something we need to take into account. And I think we can probably find somebody else who could do this.
I think, let me,
Go
sorry, if
ahead.
I may, Mary, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So just to, I think we're looking right now in order to have some continuity of operations. There's I think my update indicated that there is a dearth of folks willing to sort of serve in an interim capacity at this moment. And that, as Claudette was suggesting, there may be a need for some deeper recruitment for an interim at this time. And so I think by appointing an existing staff member, you're looking to sort of plug the gap for the day-to-day operations while we continue to have someone for 3 to 6 months, if not longer, in an interim role. So I think maybe, for me, I don't see an existing staff member as someone who should serve for more than a brief period of time in this position, right? So I just wanted to make that clear. I know in the past this office and with Phil Decker has served extensively. That is not something that I imagine personally.
Just raise the thought, that's all.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I wanted to clarify that I'm personally appreciate Mary's motion because I'm looking for some continuity while we actually find an intern, whether it be through deeper recruitment services or this one name that was brought forward by VLCT. Does that, Mary, did you want to say anything further? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Unless there's some reason to do this tonight, I'd like to table it to the next meeting.
We have a motion on the table.
We have a motion on the table, but we're discussing.
Yeah, and I don't think we have the luxury of waiting 2 weeks,
Well,
That's-
he's already gone ahead and had discussions with him. So the wheels are in the works, but I don't know that it's necessary for us to confirm it at this point. I'd like to see us move expeditiously to find another interim person.
So I just wanted to clear, were you making a motion, Marcia, or not?
There's a motion.
There's a
on the
motion on the
table.
table, so I
Right.
want to, so we could, if there's no further discussion, we can vote on Mary's motion and then go from there.
It was part of the discussion that we might consider doing that instead.
Okay, thank you. Rob, do you have any comments?
I think we should just proceed with the question.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of appointing or affirming Rod Francis as an interim, a town manager until a further interim could be identified, please raise your hand. Okay, roll call.
Is that effective September 1st? Oh, we should have a date in it.
Oh,
Okay, I'm going to do a roll call. Thank you, everyone co-chairing our meeting. It's appreciated. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Claudette, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary, how do you vote?
yes.
Marcia, how do you vote?
No,
And I'm a yes. Okay. Claudette, go ahead.
I'd like to move that we authorize Roger to contact or to to contract with VLCT in a search for an interim town manager, as well as a search for a permanent town manager. I think
Can
they
I
can
s-
go parallel tracks.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Roger, I sense some hesitancy here on your part.
Um, I think we should separate the, so, sorry, just to be clear, made by Claudette, seconded by Rob. So now we're in discussion. My only hesitancy is I would just like to sort of deal with one task at a time. I think you may be onto something, Claudette, that it may be worth asking for deeper recruitment services for an interim and then pay for it accordingly. And then that would be my interest and my focus personally, but I'm happy to execute whatever the board wishes.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Mary, and then Rob.
If we're going to search, why not also engage Municipal Resources, Inc. if we're looking, and I agree to separate the two processes for interim. It's different for interim, that's for continuity. And there are actually a lot of consideration that we should put into a more long-term person. I think that's an entirely different process. So I think it's
Right.
just sort of, as I expected, having been through this, as have others in this room, it's a lot of balls in the air. And we're going to have some courage and just put out our ads and feelers, and we're going to get less done if there are not enough people around to do the work that needs to be done. We have to pull back on some things and get through this time. So it's not going to be, maybe it'll be smooth, but I think it could have its, difficult aspects, and we're going to have to get used to that.
Okay, Rob, did you have your hand up? Did I see that?
I wasn't implying that it's an either or situation, that the parallel searches. If the interim can be handled at no extra charge through VLCT, then that's fine, but we don't want to not start looking for a permanent replacement.
Okay. The only thing I will add is, as Mary said and Marcia nodded to, is that while I'm certainly able, or I'm more interested, I can ask the question to VLCT, Municipal Resources Inc. about what that process might look like in terms of that permanent search. But I suspect in that conversation, we will learn quickly that you would have to have a bit of a board conversation about what that job description would look like, and more conversations of what kind of hire you would want to make, right? And so that's another reason why I would like to sort of work with the existing tools that we have, right? And by way of job description and what have you, to sort of get that interim in. But I'm happy to interpret the motion that's on the table as the latter half of it as a general inquiry.
I don't think could I hear it again? I don't think that it's.
It
right for you to do that.
authorized a contract.
Okay, I need to hear it again.
Miranda, would you
If you
mind
don't
repeating
mind.
the motion?
Brochu moved to authorize Roger Arnold to contract with VLCT to search for an interim town manager and a long-term town manager.
That's what I thought. Thank you. I don't think you have that leeway, Roger, when it's written that way, to consider the second part to be a general inquiry. I think it needs to be modified a little bit.
Okay, well, let's.
So I'll amend my motion to just have Roger contract with VLCT for an interim town manager search,
Does Rob agree?
if Rob agrees.
Sure.
Thank
Okay,
you,
second.
Claudette. And I think just in general, we need to be working on those two tracks. But I think as far as what Roger needs to do right now, I think this is a wiser first step.
Right, I'm merely making contact on behalf of the governing body. Okay, any further discussion on this now amended motion that we have? Go ahead, Marcia.
So the motion as it stands would not impair your ability to talk to the person who has been identified as an available former administrator.
I don't believe so, but I don't believe so, but I would be happy to take that motion after the fact, just for the benefit of clarity. I think that's important.
Okay.
So we have a motion on the table, made and seconded to speak further with VLCT about recruitment services for an interim search. So I'm going to call the question, if that's okay.
Do we want the public comment before the question?
Yes, thank you, Claudia. I see that Linda Cook has her hand up. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, two questions. One, if you hire this administrator assistant, they will then be confirmed as the interim town manager, correct?
So we would do like what we do with any, I imagine, which we would execute a contract with a term to be determined and a job description to be decided on, and it would be a term contract for a period of time defined by the board, subject to renewal. So even with a motion, I imagine there would still be some kind of contract even for this temporary assistance, but I am merely speculating.
The question I'm asking, because I'm hearing it both ways, whoever is hired, even if it's this town administrator, will actually be titled the interim town manager, correct?
Yes, we are a town manager form of government. They will do all the duties of Title 24.
Okay, and the second part is to support what Mary Layton said. VLCT was a part of the hiring for Herb, and the amount of workload was cut down dramatically by having them help sort through and organize. They were very useful in looking for a town manager.
Also a town committee.
Yes, thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now I'll call the question for the motion that's on the table. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Marcia, would you like to make your motion?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to move to authorize Roger to speak to the person identified as a former town administrator who may be available to take the interim town manager position.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Claudette. Any further discussion?
I don't feel comfortable in having a town administrator fill this role. Just saying.
Okay, we got some hands on that one. Okay, Marcia, go ahead, and then Claudette.
I think it's an interesting thing. We might learn something. And, you know, there have been suggestions by various folks in town that we actually need a town administrator. And so I'm not afraid to learn something if this person can show us some different facets of what they do, but is also familiar enough to take on this position.
Okay, Claudette, did you have any comment?
And my only comment is we don't know if this person is qualified as a town manager or not until Roger at least reaches out and speaks to them. Maybe their background is sufficient, or is that is compatible with an actual town manager, and the only previous jobs they held were administrator because that's either all they could get or that's all they wanted, or who knows why. But it certainly doesn't hurt to reach out and just have Roger have a conversation with this person and look at a resume and see if he thinks it's worthy of a full board interview.
Right, this is a purely administrative motion for the sake of transparency. Any further comments, or can I call the question?
Call the question, please.
Okay, I'm gonna call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you.
I don't think
Not in
Roll call.
Oh, I didn't see Mary's hand, sorry. Thank you, Mary. Let's roll call. Marcia, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Mary,
No,
Claudette,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay, thank you. I'm looking for you on my screen, not next to
I
me.
know, it's, I could hit you.
Yes, please do. Any further discussion on this agenda item? Let's take a 5-minute break. It is 8:04. We'll come back at 8:52. Okay. Thank you. Okay, it is 8:53 on August 11th. I am resuming the select board meeting. Okay, so the next item is a discussion of the policing study reforms and process. Board will finalize decisions and we will take some motions because I think we have performed a lot of labor on this. So I think it's time. So I'm going to just begin with my memo that was in the packet. We left off. I had expressed some concerns and it was generously suggested by Marcia and Claudette that you should try to work out your concerns in a revision and bring it to the group. And so I tried to do just that in 3 matters. I wanted to be more clear on the goals or expected outcomes with the RFP. I wanted to more clearly delineate the public engagement process piece with what might be called the data collection and other investigation effort piece. And then I wanted to remove the task force and committee charge from the proposal and imply in that proposal that a charge would be written and drafted and formed by the board. And largely these revisions just had 2 questions of clarity that I wanted to introduce. And yes, I had added some line item, some sort of tasks under the scope of work, but otherwise I retained a large part of what was previously introduced. And the only other thing I will say is I believe Marcia had flagged some caveats for public participation. I think that's all well and good, but it could be defined either in a contract with a potential consultant or as a disclaimer to whatever outreach they do. I didn't necessarily think it needed to be defined within the scope of work, just like the task force itself. So that is what I had done. I admit that they might be technical fixes, but to me, they give some clarity that I feel comfortable with. Rob, I believe it was implied that I would work with you. It was a function, I ran out of time and needed to meet a deadline. So I apologize that we didn't get to work together on this, but that's where I'm at. Any question? And I included Marcia and Claudette's edited version underneath my edits. So that is the summary of where we're at. I think no matter what we do, we should be prepared to have our conversations be tonight's conversation be as workshoppable as possible if we have any concerns, so we could move something or else nothing forward. I do not want to put this on the agenda again in this form. That's how I feel. Okay. Comments or questions or edits? Go ahead, Mary.
I appreciate, Roger, I thought you brought clarity to what we're trying to do with this. I like that you had the 2 questions. One is sort of listening to the community, identifying what the community wants to get out of this study. And the other is kind of an analysis of the police department and its performance. So I appreciated that split. I went through this and I didn't disagree with anything in it. I did want to move some things around, which I don't know if we have time for that tonight, to edit everything. But I did feel it was important on section 3 under performance timeline. I thought it would be good to sort of think of this. It's not a contract, but it's moving in that direction. It's outlining our expectations for this. And I thought, in addition to the tough language on the timeline, number 1, that there should be a holdback, like some kind of holdback. I just threw in 10% to make sure that the person who is performing for us does what we actually say. And this was prompted in part by reading about a similar effort up in Burlington where questions weren't addressed that were asked for. And also I was wondering whether we might want to split this effort into A and B, A being engagement with the public in Norwich Police Department. I thought they could be brought in a little bit. And section B, provide expertise on policing services and trends, like to split it up. And if it was amenable to everyone to split it in that way, A and B, I would be inclined to go with A, which is sort of the listening part of it, the community part of it, and then B. I suggested an expenditure so we could talk about expenditures of 10,000 for A, 10,000 in B. Start with A and see if that could get done within the time frame, and finish that up. And then if there's sufficient time, then to go back to section B. So I don't know. I think it's basically, I think it's good. I think between the efforts that everybody's put into it, I think it could be tuned up a little bit. And I would feel more comfortable about this if kind of the monetary parts and the time and money parts were more clear. Like, what do we want to happen in a certain amount of time, and some kind of idea about, do we want to have some kind of cap on this or some kind of idea of what it might cost?
Okay. Thanks, Mary. Marcia and Claudette, did you have any thoughts? This was not. Go ahead, Claudette.
I'm not sure I get what Mary's saying with A and B.
So I think, Mary, if I may,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think what Mary is essentially saying is, so the public engagement part might be a part A, and then the second part might be a part B. And so, and you were saying that you're more keen on moving forward if they were to be separated with the part A.
And what would be part B? I don't.
So if you look at the scope of work and the proposal, the one that I had done, question 1, what types of level of services does the Norwich community desire in terms of public safety, is A for Mary, I think.
Yeah, I just label it that so it'd be easier to think about as an outline. But
Okay.
yes.
And then the second question, what services did the Norwich Police Department perform, and what services, if any, currently provided could be more effectively done by other agencies, would be a B. And underneath these two questions, there is the scope, some of which has been edited from the previous work that you and Marcia had done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I guess until we let this and find out what some potential costs will be,
right.
I would rather defer on splitting it until we know what the complete RFP would potentially cost.
Okay.
And my second part is just in the report and writing the report. I just have a little bit of concern about the timeline, that a report would be drafted by November 2021, given that it's almost, I mean, we're almost in
September.
September. They wouldn't probably get their work started if we let this, got some responses back, reviewed them. When could they actually start the work? And I'm guessing that it would probably be fall. So I'm thinking the November, and I understand why you have those timelines, because we want to get something for the budget. But we could also always just put a placeholder in for the budget if we
Okay.
choose to go forward, and push those report times out a little bit,
Okay.
noting that we have to get something done or in front of us and approved by us in time for the warrants. So that's mid-January.
Okay. Did you
But otherwise,
any?
I'm happy with this proposal as it's written.
Okay. Which is largely you and Marcia's work, so thank you. Marcia, did you have any concerns or questions or comments?
Yes, good work. Stylistically, I would suggest that it's a little confusing. You've got a lot of ones and twos and threes and fours, and they're divided up with italicized headings. So I think it would be helpful, just in trying to talk to you or make notes to talk to you about, it was difficult to say, paragraph 1.
Yeah.
So it would be good to have those somehow delineated differently. I think that on page 106, see, I'm having trouble with this, paragraph 1, it's the first italicized heading.
Okay.
It omits the statistical data reported by the Norwich Police Department in the annual reports, I think, and the Vermont Judicial Council data. I'm really worried about omitting any data or not suggesting that it's important. I think we have to make sure that we're broad-minded about all of it and not narrow the investigation.
So I'm sorry, just to be clear, you're talking about point 1, the consultant will determine a methodology to collect, gather, and analyze data from that one?
I think it's on your page 2, under provide expertise, number 1, the consultant will determine the methodology.
Yeah.
That's the one I think it's missing from.
What is
then
missing?
It's admissed in specifying analyzing the data. You say from NPD reported statistics. Maybe that includes, and they'll know it's the annual reports, but you don't have the Vermont Judicial Council data. There's a lot of data there.
So I have I put specify. So to your point, we shouldn't necessarily specify it, but I put the crime research group because I believe that is the entity that traffic stops are supposed to be reported to by law. But to your point, like that should be, we don't necessarily have to name that specificity. Does that?
As long as it gets there so that they understand that it exists.
Okay.
And then paragraph 3 there, advising on collective bargaining. I'm just wondering if that's beyond the scope of their necessary skill level. That seems more like in the realm of legal advice. So I can't see that that's really an appropriate thing to ask of them. Paragraph 4, how is the NPD standard operating procedure distinguished from the Norwich PD policy? That's my question. Does that paragraph make sense?
Yes. So thank you, Marcia. So I rewrote that following the policy that we authored regarding the public posting of. I originally had public posting of all policies essentially, and we worked with Jennifer Frank to define that language as key department. So her argument, which the board agreed with when we did the policy, is that language would suffice for any consequential public interacting policy.
Okay. Then paragraph 4 at the bottom of the page, I'm really concerned about anything that talks about anonymity. I think we really have to be careful not to be in any way seen to be promising that there's going to be anonymity, because there's just some things we can't, we have an obligation to disclose. So I think that needs to be reviewed. And it's mentioned again on page 3, paragraph 5. And then under the page 108, which would be qualifications. Just wondering about tweaking it so it says paragraph 4, I think it is, maybe.
This is all from you, I by the way.
Yep. I frequently amend my own writing.
Okay, just to be clear, that's fine.
Familiarity with and interest in creating new decolonized systems and how currently operating systems may work with or be amended by new decolonized systems. In other words, demonstrated familiarity with restorative and transformative models and technology. Just trying to keep it maybe a little more open. And then maybe add a new paragraph to replace paragraphs 6 and 7. If you're going to start listing, or we're going to start listing different types of folks, maybe it has to be a proper list, experience working with groups that can be defined as historically marginalized, low income, psychologically labeled, and add to it, aging populations, and those who identify as having been victimized or the victim of crime or otherwise suffering from some level of post-traumatic stress related to any actual or perceived law enforcement issues.
Okay.
That's it.
So, okay. Thank you, Marcia. So I'll come back to that. So just to sum up, so you number 6 in qualifications, you were interested in as you had outlined, and then you were, I don't have an answer for the anonymous. All I said was I changed it to maybe, like they may propose. That's not something we, I think that we can communicate that concern going forward. I mean, that might be something that we actually would want a consultant to help us with, because it addresses we want people to feel safe to offer their commentary, but we also want to, make sure we deal with the issues as you've outlined. So.
Right, because legally that puts us potentially in a bind.
So are you going to edit that to be may, but leave anonymously in, or?
It already says may, but Marcia, do you have an edit for that? Go
Or
ahead.
just leave
Go ahead.
anonymous out?
Well, I think I had a caveat in the original that said something like, so if you leave anonymously, then put in the caveat that there are some things that can't be kept anonymous if they're disclosed.
I remember that, yeah.
So, and you think that caveat will be important to a potential consultant to understand?
I think so.
Okay. So I'm happy to add that back in if others agree.
Sounds good to me.
Rob, did you have any discussions?
Sure.
Rob, I'll hear from Rob and then we'll go.
The thing that I was very much interested in is trying to find the consultant who might be able to take all the known sources of data and possibly see areas where more data could be picked up that we're not aware of, that are quantifiable, but something that we don't run into in our normal course of discussions. And so, I mean, just asking for that capacity, that willingness to look over a broad spectrum would be useful. I think that refers back to not limiting the data that somebody is examining.
Okay, and let me just, so that really relates to number one, so
yeah.
having more open-ended, revising with more open-ended language for the consultant will determine a methodology. Okay. Okay. Any other, Mary, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, in reviewing it, I also wanted to hear from the police department. Just what kind of insight do they have? They have a lot of experience. I don't think this should be one-sided.
I agree.
The place for that.
It was sort of stuck in there, but I think it should be up front.
There's one place for it, and it's, where does it?
Yeah,
say?
here is, it's under number
It's
4.
number,
Wait a minute,
go
that's
ahead.
in my thing.
I see number 7 under meeting requirements, where it just, which actually should probably be edited because yeah.
I think you should just move it up front, like where it says scope of services.
Okay.
Engagement with public and the Norwich Police Department, or maybe other police. What types and level of services does the Norwich community desire in terms of public safety? What types of insight can the police department bring to the conversation? Just bring it up front.
Claudette, go ahead.
I'm okay with Mary's suggestion, Marcia's comments. And I would also, I see that our acting chief Keeling is here. I'm wondering if he has any thoughts on this proposal. And if we would be willing to hear them, if he does.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm not able to.
You're muted, sir. Sorry. Unmute.
Yeah, sorry, I was pressing the space bar hoping that that would do the trick, but obviously it didn't. Good evening, everyone. Simon Keeling here. Very interested in the opportunity here. And also glad to see now that the select board is willing to entertain views from the police department. And that wasn't included in the previous memos and communiques that I've read. I think it's important going forward that we share all sides of the discussion, not just the views of the select board, not just the views of the public, not just the views of those that are happy with or disgruntled with the police department, but also the police. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the select board for their diligence. I'd also like to thank my department. We are, as you all know, struggling at the moment with a time of extreme change. We are understaffed. We are trying to keep together a department that is struggling with older technology. We don't have the staffing in order to have resilience, in order to do our job. And it's important that we have a say in what we are actually experiencing. So I think that's often forgotten. So I thank the select board in a roundabout way for including us at this particular juncture. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, either on or offline. And I think it's important that we're all heard. So again, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Marcia, did you share your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to assure Officer Keeling that, you know, I believe in our previous
Acting Chief Keeling.
Acting Chief Keeling. In our previous work, we had stipulated that it would be important to hear from the police and that they be included. And I feel strongly that when your job is being talked about, you should have a voice at the table. So I would like to know if you've had a chance to look at this. What else do you think a consultant should be asked to look at?
Thank you, Marcia. Any other public comments or any other select board comments? And then I'll take some public comments.
I was looking for an answer from Acting Chief Keeling.
Sure, I'm gonna let me
Okay.
do a round and then I'll
Sure.
direct him with your question. Any other board members? Go ahead, Acting Chief Keeling. Marcia's question was, what additions or revisions would you make to an RFP if forwarded to yourself?
I don't know whether I'm qualified to answer that question, at least from my standpoint as interim chief. My correct title is interim chief, ma'am. Thank you.
That's right. We've been using acting and interim interchangeably, and that's on us. Apologies.
Understood, but the writing that I received from the town manager was interim chief, but just for clarification. As far as what the consultant is going to be looking into, there's an awful lot of talk about data. We've gone over at length in previous select board meetings what sort of data we're going to be looking at. Certainly we have Spillman, which is our command and control system, logs all of our calls, logs where they came from, the complainants, the organizations that we work with, the locations, the times, etc., etc. That is our main database. What we are looking at here, I suppose, is how we use the data and how we compare it with other organizations. And I think we've got a bit of a problem here. Norwich is not your typical Vermont town. It's bordered by towns that have different problems, different geographies, different cultures, different societies, different sizes of police forces. So I think that the thing that I would ask the consultant to be mindful of is that when we do a comparison, if that's what we're looking to do, that we compare apples with apples and not apples with oranges, and just to keep that in the back of our minds. Be more than happy to entertain any applications for data and lists of calls, etc., etc. But with that needs to follow the understanding that calls don't just come in on 911 lines. They come in from a variety of sources. So I'd be more than happy to work with the consultant as long as they're prepared to listen to us as far as how the data is collected, how it is put in by the dispatchers, and how it is actually managed and answered by the police department.
Thank you. I went to interrupt earlier just to clarify that Spillman is one of the record management systems that is part of the crime research group. Just so we report to Spillman. I think there's Valcor, which is another one. And I stand to be corrected, but I just wanted to, we were talking about the crime research group earlier. So I just want to clarify that. Marcia, go ahead.
Roger, are you anticipating that when we have, I mean, if we're lucky enough to find someone to do this, and we sit down to do a contract, are you anticipating that there'll be some sort of a glossary of information that we're going to be able to give them, that at which point we could have interim Chief Keeling, feeding that information so that we're sure we're getting it and understand what is available and what it means?
I mean, I think we could all expect that a contract may look like they take on different fidelity than what we are putting out in an RFP. I think certainly what Mary was talking about in terms of holdbacks and a concern to make sure that whatever we execute, serves, the public and serves our questions or serves public money best, I think is a future conversation. We're not executing a contract this evening. We're trying to put out an RFP to see if anyone wants to take on these questions. I don't know if that helps, and board members should feel free to answer Marcia's question. The only thing, go ahead, Claudette.
No, I was actually going to make a motion.
Please.
So if you want, oh, okay. So I move to let the RFP for policing and community safety consulting services as contained in the meeting packet and as amended and agreed to tonight.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Claudette, seconded by Marcia. The only thing I would like to say, since we have the benefit of our interim police chief with us, is I actually think it's very unique, particular, and should be commended that they have observed and watched while we have these conversations. I think that really sort of speaks really wonderfully and highly of the department to understand that this is a community conversation and we have to really struggle with all of the labor behind that. And I really respect that. I think that's really unique here. And so I feel thankful. And Judy Powell as well, Herb is telling me. So that I'll offer that. I see some nods, but any further discussion?
Pointing to his ear, so.
We're moving away, looking away from the microphone. So
yes, but I think you got the sense of what I was offering.
Yes. And agree.
Any further discussion? Go ahead, Chief Ealing, I see your hand up.
Just one thing that I'd like to ask the select board. Often these police themed discussions take place towards the end of your meetings. Both Judy and I start very early in the morning. And I was wondering if you could see to it that you perhaps move the police themed parts of your discussion earlier in your select board meetings so that we don't have excessively long days. I usually get up at 5 in the morning. It would really help if we could discuss the policing side a little earlier in the select board meetings. I know it's not that important, but I thought I'd raise it just to see if that could be accommodated in the future.
Certainly, and I certainly wish we had gotten to it at 8:05. So I more than hear that. So thank you, and I think we can do that. So any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right. So we have an amendments to the gift policy and we have amendments to the capital budget policy. I would definitely like to move forward with the gift policy, but I question here at 9:30 whether or not we would want to move on with the capital budget policy, but let's, I just throw that out there for the moment. Let's definitely just move on to the gift policy and then we'll see how we're feeling. How's that sound?
Sure.
Go ahead, Claudette.
So I will already just say, can we just do the gift and then call it a night? As, you know, Marcia and I have been sitting on this. I mean, we know it's, but
yeah,
it's like we're all feeling fried for sure.
There's one issue that I think we should discuss with the gift policy. So if we may move forward, because I think it's structural to whatever we go set out to do. So maybe we'll get to, I'll introduce that point and Claudette, and then I think we should, and then.
No, I'm saying let's discuss the gift policy.
Oh, okay.
And then
let's do it.
Call it a night.
Okay. So is there an agreement by consensus to table item number 10, amendments to the capital budget policy?
Yes.
So I would agree with that.
Okay, I'm seeing all yes. So thank you for that. Okay, so the gift policy. Coletta, do you want to sort of talk about like the big question that we're wrestling with right now in this gift policy revision, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, the big question both Roger and I are wrestled with, and I sent him some edits, and he suggested a different way of approaching this, is how we deal with the rec department. And Roger sent me, and I don't think it was included, it was not included in our packet. The special purpose or the special, I can't remember what the name is, Roger, of those funds, of which the Girard Fund and the Kids Bridge is another. And there were two others, one that I think incorporated or was had under it the scholarship fund, because nothing is listed as a scholarship fund, but Bree mentions a scholarship fund. So it's, yeah, charitable giving funds. So my issue with this charitable giving funds is that the outdoor rec fund and the rec council donation fund, the definitions of what the funds will be used for are too vague, in my opinion. And so if there is a scholarship fund, it should be listed as a scholarship fund. So I guess that's how to deal with the rec charitable giving funds is the big issue. One of
yes, and so
major.
Bree is here in the audience, and she's she's speaking that not all of these are necessarily active funds, but I think one of the questions Claudia and I talked about is drafting is, do we allow any sort of charitable giving or funds, as they're called, locally or locally here, to hear me? Can you hear me now?
You need to act like a rock star, Roger.
Can you hear me now?
No.
I'm like the most sheepish rock star. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know what you heard, but Bree is here saying, suggesting that not all of these funds are active, but I think the question still remains, what is the process for these kinds of funds that we here call charitable giving funds, but may effectively be special purpose funds? What sort of approval process do we want to authorize those funds, if anything? I think that was one of the questions. Herb is now gesturing to the town report, so we're getting some interaction from the audience. But does anyone have any comments while I look to see the gesture?
Is there a way to exempt or define funds intended for specific programs and to be expended within the calendar year or the fiscal year? I wonder if that would help any.
Can you repeat your question for us?
I wonder if, in relationship specifically to rec charitable giving funds, is there any way to define exempt things that are being exempt from having explicit approval by the select board as being contributions towards specific programs, not to be held longer than a year or the fiscal year?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Claudette, and then I'm going to mention what was handed to me by Herb. And then.
Yeah, and I guess in answer to Rob, I would think that restricting something to the current fiscal year to me is very, very, very limiting. And your project may not be done in that fiscal year.
Well, if it's a longer term project that involves a greater sum of money, then it would have to come, I think, before us as a gift. I'm thinking in terms of donation of baseballs or soccer balls, or the scholarship fund for the rec programs that year.
But if you had money left over, wouldn't you want to roll it over? Or be able to roll it over and not have to spend it in 1 year?
What is the problem you would be looking to solve with that suggestion, Rob?
Simply the requirement to report each and every and approve each and every gift specific to a short-term program.
Okay. Go ahead, Marcia, and then Claudette.
I think I'm trying to get my head around the purpose of the gift policy is to make sure that we know what we're getting, make sure that there's nothing inappropriate happening. And also, I would think it should perforce kind of have some guardrails so that someone just couldn't take the money and use it for anything, right? I always think of the worst case scenario. So I would think that maybe the treasurer would have some input to this, but it would seem like if you limit the amount of donations that could be given, and then you, in number 1, and then in number 2, you make sure that there is an adequate reporting so that, I don't think it's too onerous to say 100 softballs were given to the department and 50 of them were given to, whatever. I think we're in the business of having to be accountable. And so I think somehow that process has to be set up so that if Bree needs help doing it, maybe we can find that for her. I don't know, but I do think we have to make sure that it's accountable and we know where stuff goes.
Well, I'm not saying that these things shouldn't be reported.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that approval by the board below a certain level is not really required. It shouldn't be required, I don't think.
Okay, just to be clear, I'm sorry to interrupt, that the policy there's a policy statement that says this.
Okay.
It says the recreation department, under donations to the recreation department, which is a stylization under general under procedures, is the recreation department may establish funds in support of special purpose initiatives with the authorization of the select board. The town manager or their designee shall work with the recreation director or their designee to determine reporting procedures to the select board for individual gifts that exceed $500.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's one of the policy statements. Go ahead, Marcia. And then Claudette, I'm sorry.
Oh, Claudette?
Marcia and then Claudette. I'm sorry that I cut her.
So then if number 2 could have a similar thing so that we have a process by which we get an annual report or something, just so that we can see what came in and what went out.
Yes, a previous version, I think you may have deleted it, Marcia, a previous version had that in there, but yes.
So annual reporting.
Yeah. Claudette, did you have a comment?
If I did, I can't remember what it was.
I'm sorry. So the
It's
thing,
getting late.
it is getting.
But to get back to Marcia's point about why we want a gift policy or why we are amending this gift policy, it is first and foremost so that the select board or our committee groups, town committees, appointed committees, commissions, whatever, are in alignment with the select board's goals.
Right.
And are not going rogue and seeking solicitations from citizens or philanthropic organizations without the board knowing what they're doing and having us agree with their pursuit of funds.
And the policy also has a purpose statement, which I think
Right.
Marcia was setting our eyes to. Yes. Okay.
And I think this comes way closer than what our previous policy did.
It does.
In addressing that.
The one thing, so Herb, and what I was characterizing as an interaction from the audience, handed me the town report that talks about designated and special purpose funds. And there's recreation facilities donations is reported as a designated and special purpose fund, and as is the recreation scholarship donation fund. So that leads me to assume that these funds follow whatever policies we have determined for designated funds. Is that correct?
But they're not listed under the charitable giving funds. So how would somebody know that those two funds exist? So either the names are, the funds are the same and the names are different, or the fund, they've got nothing to do with each other.
I think Herb is just stating that if for the expenditures of these funds, or these two funds, there's a process determined, and the gift policy may seek to provide guidance for donations to these funds. I don't then know how. I think what we're talking about in this policy is funds that are not listed as a designated fund, which is obviously approved by voters. Does that make sense? So I think what we're determining in policy, or what we're trying to talk about, either we're looking to exempt these other funds that are not designated funds from the gift policy process, or else.
If it's not a gift policy, those funds must be under the trustee of the public funds purview or control.
Herb wants an opportunity to provide some clarity on that. If he's going to get a mic.
Is this microphone still working? Okay.
Yes, MC it.
Right. So the trustees of funds basically take care of funds that go into a level of trust. The simple one is like the cemetery funds where something is set up. Beyond where, then there may be other types of funds that they would take care of. But this type of a thing is essentially the way that they're created is through, they're the equivalent of a reserve fund. For whatever reason, and Marcia knows what I'm talking about because we've talked about this before, this town has chosen to call them designated funds, but essentially they're reserve funds. And then there are some that are special purpose funds, which are the equivalent of reserve fund, but they did something like they're sort of like a one-time raising of funding to deal with a specific project, like the band stand replacement, the affordable housing fund, that sort of thing. And then there are some that are a little bit more recurring, like the paving fund, some of the recreation funds. And so that's just a little bit of the difference between designated fund versus special purpose. The funds that are in either of those can't be spent without board approval. And as you know, there's a separate warrant that usually comes out in the AP warrants as part of that process. There, as you know, also in your monthly financial reporting with the balance sheet, that balance sheet includes all the monthly activity related to all of the designated funds that we have. So you do get a monthly report of the transfers in, out, et cetera. It doesn't have the detail in terms of specific, the balance sheet doesn't have the specific detail of what it is. That's what the AP warrant comes out for when you take action on those particular items. There's usually a note that's gone with that. And then there's, if there's an expenditure, there's something that goes in the invoice packet, which again, anybody has access to in advance of the meeting once the AP warrant packet the packet has gone out to the board members. The other aspect of that is that if there are some designated funds, special purpose funds that have allocated line item numbers over time that aren't basically used anymore, but still are there. When you create the line, you don't necessarily get rid of the line once you've done something. For instance, the bandstand still has an active number that's out there. So if you go back in and have to redo the bandstand again, you've got a number that you can use for that purpose, even though that really isn't done anymore per se. So there are some things that have been cleaned up where there's been money that's been hanging out for a period of time, and we've tried to close out, so to speak, as many of those as we can since I've been here. There's still a couple that remain, but the real point of giving the information to Roger on the annual report is those basically are the ones that remain active at this point. That was really what I was trying to indicate with that. So I don't know if that's helpful in terms of some clarity.
I think so. I guess my concern at this point, even though Claudette and I are proposing sort of this policy statement forward. Well, let me take a comment from Cheryl on this first. How's that? Go ahead, Cheryl.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Roger, really.
No, I was about to move on, which I shouldn't have done. So please.
Okay. And I posed my questions back a ways about when is it the town's responsibility to manage these gifts and when is it the trustees, because it's been unclear. And there was some backstory to that where trust funds were taken from the trustees because they were deemed to be town funds, and the vote was taken and things happened. Then some came back to us. I think what's important is, again, why is the money being given? Because that's never really been captured over the years. So when a fund is established, it should have memorialized the reason for it, and it's restricted for that purpose. It's not designated, it's not reserved, it's restricted for that purpose. So again, when the Girard Fund, for the most recent example that occurred, was opened, if you went to the obituary, it was stated there, this fund will be used for this purpose, and people could donate in John's memory to this fund. That's how you can establish how the fund should be used. Was that money coming in for the town to manage, or is it for the trustees to manage? And I was never quite clear on that, not to be particular to that one, but future and some of the past. So I didn't know if while you've been working on this policy, anybody had any more clarity on that matter.
Go ahead, Claudette.
The statute to me is not clear. The trustee of the establishing the trustee of the public funds to me is really not clear. I did look in your treasurer's, the VLCT treasurer's handbook to try to get some clarity, and it does discuss the trustee of the public funds in that handbook. And what I recall reading is that if the funds are designated or special purpose or restricted, then they're not under the purview of the trustee of the public funds. And what I can't remember is if the conservation trust funds are something that should be under the trustee of the public funds. And I don't know. I think that because there are two separate, because conservation commissions have their own statute and authority, that's something that's beyond my level. But we do in this policy address restricted donations. So I think that versus unrestricted donations.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Well, the statute 24 VSA 2431, trustees of public funds, specifically refers to real and personal estate except U.S. public money held by a town in trust for any purpose, including cemetery trust funds, unless the person giving the same otherwise directs, shall be under the charge and management of 3 trustees. So I mean, maybe that's the answer, that it's the magic. If there's an instrument that's a trust, the trustees do it. So otherwise, stuff that's given to us for other things that's not in trust for a particular thing wouldn't.
Right. I think Herb is nodding, like Claudette and I took up a discussion of that, and that was what we came to as well, I believe. So, but I think that open question aside, which we may linger on, the one thing, we're having all this conversation about rec funds, and our rec director is here late with us, and we should seek their opinion. The only thing I would say is I actually think that we're introducing an inequity by talking about the recreation department in particular. I think one of the utilities of just talking about these dollar amounts, right, up to $500 or $500 to $4,000, whatever the policy, the previous version of the policy stated, is it's guidance that can be applied to all departments. And I think our conversations introduced the idea that there could be liability affiliated with gifts, regardless of the dollar amount. But I would suggest that keeping it in the realm of just the dollar amount and not trying to treat rec separately would just provide a lot of clarity in an equitable way across departments. But I'm now taking a fork in the road, Claudette, because we didn't discuss that.
So you're going, actually, sorry, Marcia, you're going back to a couple of renditions before where we spelled out dollar amounts and didn't identify a department over another department, over a committee or a commission or whatever. And I'm fine with that. But I think we probably need to go back and put that in. I don't think we can vote on this tonight.
Okay, Marcia, do you have your comment?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always had trouble with the idea of a dollar amount, and the only reason I sort of prevaricated was because Bree brought up a good point, I mean, but that's the problem, that the exception doesn't always prove the rule. And the fact that somebody's giving softballs is maybe not going to be objectionable to anyone, but as we saw on the listserv a long time ago, there was lots of objections when people were talking about giving money for, like Cone with a Cop or something. So if somebody decides that they want to give some particular money for something that other people think shouldn't be done, that's what I was trying to avoid, to make it equitable in that way. And that's why I thought that there was a good argument to maybe treating the rec department a little bit differently, because they're doing stuff, around sports for kids and helping them have opportunities, which is a good thing. And leaving that aside for a moment, the only other comment I had about this policy, if I can just bring that up.
Please.
Under page 3, paragraph 3, I think when we're talking about the town may require the donor to conduct a title search, if we're talking about donations of real property at the donor's cost, I think we just have to add, or to obtain whatever environmental certificate is required to ensure no hazardous waste is present. Because I think that was taken out completely. And I'm worried about that sort of smoking gun being given to the community, and we have to deal with it.
Okay, and so you're saying that to bullet point, I can see the problem with this. To bullet point 3, potential liabilities associated with the donation, such as hazardous conditions or environmental concerns, is inefficient.
Tell me where that is.
It's point 2, number 2, bullet point 3 addresses environmental hazards. Is that? And you're saying
On-
that that's insufficient?
On which page?
So
Same
page 3, number 2, when making such approval, the select board shall consider, and then bullet point 3, potential liabilities associated with the donation, such as hazardous conditions or environmental concerns.
Yeah, the reason I'm saying that it might not actually cover us is the way I'd like to see us covered is because you don't, to get to that point where we're considering potential liabilities, we don't want to pay for that investigation, right? Just like we don't want to pay for a title search, we probably don't want to pay for some environmental certification.
Well,
We
maybe
might-
we might, it depends on what the gift is.
We might, but we should at least put something in here that says we may require them to provide it.
Okay.
Well, it could just change shall to may.
It already is May, so we'll just add the descriptive language that Marcia
It's a shall,
suggested.
isn't it?
Yeah, so Marcia's looking to have number 3 include environmental production,
Right.
environmental certification beyond the title search. So the town
If
may,
it-
so we're amending point 3, the town may require the donor to conduct a title search or environmental, what was your language, Marcia?
Or to obtain whatever environmental certificate is required to ensure no hazardous waste is present.
Yeah, at donor's cost to demonstrate.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Okay.
Others agree.
Yep, sounds good.
So we need to revisit, and I'm gonna turn to Bree, but we need to get some board feedback on the rec funds. Is there anything beyond what Claudette and I have listed here needs to be further established at this time?
For the recreation,
Yeah, so under the policy statement, it's on page, this is what we had to address this. Procedures, general, donations to the rec department. There's 2 statements. The recreation department may establish funds. And then I have in brackets a statement that considered process for expenditures made from rec funds. So in other words, but I don't necessarily think that statement needs to be defined anymore. So I guess my question is statement number 1 under donations to the rec department on page 2 sufficient to address those concerns?
I think no. I think no. I think so number 1 says reporting the gifts. But again, don't we also have to have some sort of reporting of how the gifts are used? And
This says, it says, no, this assumes that that's a procedure that we will seek to have clarity on from the rec director or the town manager.
so you're saying that there is a process already in place and that we just need to have it clarified for ourselves.
That's what this policy statement says. This policy statement says that the department can establish funds in support of special purpose initiatives, which we might want to revisit that language, with the authorization of the select board. So if somebody wants to donate money in a will for the rec department, they would come, or the rec director would come, it would be authorized by the board, and then the town manager or the designee shall work with the rec director to determine whenever we get an individual gift to that fund that exceeds $500.
So maybe I can provide a real life example, Roger?
Yeah, so, and Herb pointed out just before that, Claudette, that all the other statements in here still apply. It's just, it's suggesting that there are some funds that need to be set up for certain purposes. Go ahead, Claudette.
So a real life example could be the Kids Bridge. That the solicitation for that money or for that public outreach for funding never came, I was never approved by the board. Never, I don't think we had our previous policy covered it because it was under I can't remember the specific language.
It was a budgeted versus unbudgeted. It was,
But it matched something.
Yeah, it already, and it was a replacement for a bridge that already existed.
Yeah. Oh, for goodness sake. And of course I lost my train of thought. Oh, never mind.
You were saying it was a good
Never
example.
mind.
You're saying it was a good example. It never came to the board for approval.
Yeah. So we didn't know it was happening until we read it in the listserv, essentially. And yeah, sorry. I
think we
wigged out completely.
I think we got an update in a public. I think we heard through a public comment, and it may have made its way into a town manager report, of course. But like, no, did we ever take a motion to affirm or bless it or authorize it? No, I don't think so.
Right.
Go ahead, Marcia.
So in the rest of this policy, we don't say anything about expenditures.
No, we don't.
And so that cuts against having a paragraph 2.
Yes.
Does it, and I think we should maybe just punch up paragraph 1 to say that all other policies herein apply, except that there's an exception we recognize for the rec department because of the way it functions, and that there's going to be a detailed reporting to the board about what comes in and what goes out, not just, the line items on a spreadsheet, but actual, we got this and we gave it to this number of kids.
But Marcia, sorry, Roger, can I?
No, go ahead, please.
I personally don't want to read that someone donated a box of baseballs and how they used them. That's to me, that's a little bit ridiculous.
Yes, you might have, I think like the whole beauty of this policy is that it says that we expect a process to be made and to get something back, right? Like this could be more of a dialogue, but maybe you get a quarterly report of your baseballs and your bats, rather than sort of like hearing it.
Yeah, or how about we received, I don't know.
Okay. Is it okay if I ask Bree to Herb's coming with the spreadsheet. Bree, who's our rec director, is here. Bree, do you have any you've observed this for the past, I think, at least 20 minutes, if I'm being generous.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of things that you want to keep us bring our attention to while you grab that mic? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Nope, I agree with a lot of what Marcia's saying, and I'm actually all about transparency. I have no problem with any kind of reporting. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I would appreciate being involved when you're talking about the rec department. I know I'm really busy, but when it comes to things like this, when I've been up since 4 at 10 o'clock talking about it now, I'd rather be involved a lot earlier. If that's possible, that'd be awesome. But I don't disagree with what you're saying. I also, it's not that hard for me with our new process to add some kind of reporting tool into the registration system, which is what Roger was looking at with those other charitable giving funds. Those were actually just created to make it a little bit easier for people to understand what their gifts were going towards with restricted giving. some people don't understand what a rec facilities fund is. They're like, what am I giving to? So this was just an easier way to do that. And I did pull them down as soon as there was a question about the gift policy. So you should not be able to donate to those. I will remove them completely though. So right now it really is just a scholarship fund that's active on our site and the Gerard Fund. Yeah.
So the Kids Bridge Fund is not there anymore?
Kids Bridge, I don't think was on our website as something you could donate to. Those were always checks.
I think it was listed.
It's listed, but I don't believe you can actually donate to it because it was back in FY20, right?
It says Kids Bridge Fund FY21.
21, yeah.
And it says that it's active from 12/31/2020 to 2028.
But
neither here nor there, sorry.
Exactly. And that's so you can see it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get pulled down for me.
Okay. So just to sum up, and what I'm hearing actually is that Marcia made a suggestion that under the rec fund section of the procedures, that there could be some language modified that recognizes sort of the uniqueness of the rec department, but that otherwise this policy achieves its purpose.
Roughly, yes.
Roughly, yes. Okay. Wouldn't give it to me. Okay. So anything else other than any other suggestions other than that one? I've heard no other suggestions.
Well, and that you're going to note that it includes the rest of the policy, you know, sort of, and then number 2 goes away, I guess.
Yes.
Right.
And then just for folks who are not in the room, Herb handed me the draft capital budget and program that lists the pedestrian bridge under the rec department. So there's that. Okay. Can we move on from this agenda item? We've given, hopefully there will be one more stab with this feedback. The other concern that was raised to me, I took an afternoon away from Norwich to visit a friend in South Royalton, and yet from behind me, a trails volunteer by the name of Steve Flanders reminded me that in-kind donations by the trails volunteers are currently not recognized in any policy, and that we may wish to think that through, because they perform a considerable amount of in-kind work and gift, and that they had wondered if there would be any restrictions on their functioning, and then I thought, or any recognition of that by the board. So that's something else to put out there.
Interesting. Never thought about that and I guess I'd want to very clearly, I guess I don't like the term in kind. I would want more along the lines of, we can work it out, Roger. We'll deal with it.
Okay, I just wanted to put that out there as
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point too, because what's bubbling in other areas about the people doing things on the trails and making trails that are not sanctioned by the AT or whatever. I mean, maybe we do need to know what people are doing under a volunteer basis. I mean, I don't even know how to get my hands around that one, because we've got lots of different factions, private property owners, the AT, etc.
Trails will tell you to read their minutes.
I've been, yeah.
I don't necessarily know it's like something to solve in this policy, but it was, I raise it with all of you. Go ahead, Herb. Herb is telling us what our policy says.
As your policy is currently drafted, in-kind services such as volunteering has to be approved by the board first. So the Trails Committee volunteers, if they're doing something, is a form of a donation that you have to approve.
Right, and is that what we mean?
Where
Go
is
ahead,
that?
Marsha.
Where
It's in
is
it's
it?
in the state, it's in the definition section under gifts or donation, number 2, I guess Herb was telling us, but yes, it says shall mean monetary cash contribution, endowments, bequests, personal property, real property, equipment, in-kind goods or services, or any other asset the town has accepted for which the donor has not received any goods or services in return. I mean, like, yes, as written, you know, if you want to like redo the pavilion or build a trail, these in-kind services need our authorization.
See, you know, something that some people would think would be very, very simple is actually incredibly complex.
Mhm.
The only, go ahead, Marcia.
Was
Or
that,
not incredibly complex, but more complex than assumed.
that definition that included in-kind services, was that in the original policy?
That has never changed. It's always been in there.
Okay.
We'll look at it, Roger. How's that?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, the only thing I will say in my last moment of cheekiness for this evening, and then someone else can get the last word, please, is when this was pulled from a couple of small towns in Massachusetts, but largely the city of San Diego and Seattle. And so my question is, how can it pass muster for all these communities and not Norwich? One of the things I always say is Norwich is unique in particular, but not exceptional, and we should stop treating it as exceptional. We should just treat it as unique in particular, if I may.
Do you think this policy was pulled from?
Yes, I pulled it, and then of course in our conversations we've edited it out to be something else. But we're struggling with things that many other gift policies do not look to take on. So we have to think about what standard we're trying to achieve.
Well, the other thing we could, oh, sorry to interrupt, is that very many of the towns in the state of Vermont have rec departments that have, even though when I did the search for gifts and went to multiple towns, it was more along the lines of naming playgrounds, putting plaques up.
Yeah.
It didn't address financial donations, and I don't even think Hartford's addresses that. They all address you can't accept gifts from vendors and all of that stuff,
yeah.
So
maybe.
But I remember originally I really took a deep dive into municipalities across the state and how I couldn't find any town in the state that had a gift policy.
Right. So this is unique in particular to Norwich for sure. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So we'll work.
Sorry, I was going to move to adjourn.
Yeah. So we're going to continue to work on this, and then is there a motion to adjourn? Is that what you said, Claudette?
She might actually move.
Did you move to adjourn, Claudette?
I did.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Made by Marcia. Any discussion?
I know it's like we're punch drunk now. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, and it's good to have sort of a sense of humor. This was a difficult meeting, and there's some technical difficulties. I'm just really thankful to all of you. So thank you for all your labor.
Very nice. Thank you.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for everyone's assistance.
I'll do a Lagnus abstain.
Okay. No, I think we're all in favor.
I put my hand up. Sorry.
That's right. All in favor. Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, we're done.
We're done. Yay.